Daniel Carter grabbed the door handle of a burning building, and every instinct in his body screamed at him to let go. He didn't. Because somewhere above the smoke and the screaming and the collapsing ceiling, a woman's voice broke through the chaos, not loud, not angry, just terrified and fading, and those three words hit him like a punch to the chest. I can't move. He had walked away from this life. He had promised he would never do this again. But promises don't mean much when someone is dying 30 feet above you. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, subscribe. You won't want to miss where this goes. The night Daniel saved a stranger's life began the same way every other night of his life began for the past 5 years. Quietly, without warning, without anyone paying attention. It was a Tuesday in February. The kind of cold that doesn't just bite, it settles. The kind of cold that gets into your bones and reminds you that Colorado winters don't care about your schedule, your problems, or the list of things you told yourself you'd fix tomorrow. The temperature had dropped below 18 degrees by 7 in the evening, and the wind coming off the Rockies was moving fast and mean across the suburbs west of Denver. Daniel had been at the Hargrove Arms apartment complex since 4:30 that afternoon. Not because he lived there. He hadn't lived anywhere that felt like home in a long time. I was there because the building's hot water system had been throwing error codes since the weekend, and the property management company, a large impersonal operation out of Colorado Springs, had called his company Monday morning with a work order marked urgent. 3 floors of tenants without reliable heat. January complaints. February complaints. And now a February evening that was threatening to crack pipes before midnight. Daniel ran a small maintenance contracting company. 5 employees, decent reputation, enough contracts to keep the lights on and the bills paid. He had built it methodically, the same way he approached everything in his life after the accident. One careful decision at a time. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that required him to feel too much. He had been under the boiler room since 4:30, covered in grease, talking to his lead technician Marcus on a cell phone, while Marcus drove across town to pick up a replacement pressure valve. Tell me again why you're doing this on a Tuesday night, Marcus said. Because the work order said urgent. Everything says urgent. You ever notice that everything is urgent until it isn't? The pipes could freeze, Marcus. The pipes have been threatening to freeze since 2019, and they never actually do it. This isn't 2019. It's 18 degrees and dropping. A pause on the line. Then Marcus quieter. You eating dinner tonight? Daniel looked at his watch. 6:47. He hadn't eaten since noon. I'll grab something on the way home. Emma's already at your sister's. Yeah, she's got a science project due Thursday. Linda's helping her with it. He shifted his position, flashlight wedged between his jaw and shoulder, trying to get a better angle on the secondary valve housing. I told her I'd pick her up by 9. She wanted me to call at bedtime. So you've got 2 hours. Roughly. And you're spending them in a boiler room. I'm spending them doing my job. Marcus went quiet again, the particular kind of quiet that meant he had something to say and was deciding whether to say it. Daniel had learned to recognize that quiet over 3 years of working together. Marcus was a good man. Former Army Logistics 2 tours, came home to Denver and needed something steady and honest to do with his hands. He was organized, reliable, and he understood work as a form of respect. Respect for the people paying for it. Respect for the craft. Respect for yourself. He also worried about Daniel in a way that Daniel had never asked him to. Say what you're thinking, Daniel said. I'm thinking you could have sent Rodriguez on this one. Rodriguez is 23 years old, and he still crosses his fingers when he's reading a pressure gauge. He's getting better. He's getting better because I send him on jobs where a wrong call means a callback, not a frozen building. Daniel found the fitting he was looking for and leaned in closer. I'll be out of here by 8, 9 at the latest. You always say that. I always mean it. And then something always needs fixing. Daniel almost smiled at that. Almost. That's the job, he said. He finished the assessment at 7:15 and climbed out of the boiler room, rubbing his hands together and flexing his fingers against the cold. The building's basement hallway was dim. One of the fluorescent panels was flickering in that slow, hypnotic way that meant the ballast was going, and he made a mental note to add it to the maintenance log. He always made mental notes. He always added them to the log. He always came back. That was the thing about Daniel Carter, that most people, if they took the time to notice, would have recognized as something deeper than professionalism. He came back. He followed through. He didn't leave things half-finished. It wasn't obsessiveness. It was more like a code, a private contract he had made with himself sometime in the years after everything fell apart, when the only way he could find to keep moving was to commit to small things completely. Fix the pipe. Write the report. Pack the lunch. Show up on time. Keep Emma's world steady. Keep your own hands busy. Don't stop moving long enough to feel everything you've been refusing to feel. He took the stairwell up from the basement to the first floor, intending to do a quick walkthrough of the hallways before he left. Check that the heat was beginning to cycle properly. Make sure no tenants had reported anything else. And that's when he noticed it. Not saw. Noticed. There's a difference that most people never have to learn. Seeing is passive. Noticing is something your body does when part of you has been trained to pay attention to things that don't quite fit. Daniel noticed the smell before his conscious mind had time to name it. Something warm where cold should be. Something acrid cutting through the dry, recycled air. He stopped walking, stood still, breathed slowly. There. The smell wasn't strong. It wasn't the dramatic, unmistakable stench of an active fire. It was the early signal, the quiet chemical whisper that old wiring gives off when insulation begins to overheat inside walls where nobody can see it. Most people, even most firefighters, would have dismissed it, written it off as a neighbor burning dinner, a space heater working too hard, normal building smells on a cold winter night. Daniel didn't dismiss it, because Daniel had spent 7 years of his life learning the difference. He stood in the first-floor hallway of the Hargrove Arms at 7:19 on a Tuesday night in February, and he felt something shift inside his chest. Not panic, not fear. Something older and more complicated than either of those, the particular kind of alertness that doesn't arrive in the brain first. It arrives in the gut, in the hands, in the way your breathing changes before you've made a conscious decision about anything. He turned around and looked at the ceiling, then at the wall to his left, then at the baseboard near the stairwell door. Nothing visible, no smoke, no discoloration, no sign that anyone else in the building had noticed anything. He pulled out his phone and called the building's property management emergency line. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He hung up and called again. Voicemail. He looked down the hallway. The building was quiet, doors closed. The muffled sound of a television somewhere. The distant sound of a child laughing 2 floors up, maybe 3. The normal sounds of people settled in for a cold Tuesday night, trusting that the building around them was safe, trusting that someone somewhere was paying attention. Daniel stood very still and made a decision. He would do one walkthrough, first floor to third, check the hallways, check the stairwells. If he saw nothing, if the smell dissipated, he would log it, leave a note for the property manager, and go pick up his daughter. If he saw something, he'd call 911. He started walking. He found nothing on the first floor. The smell was faint, but consistent, not growing stronger, not fading, just there, like a sound at the edge of hearing that you couldn't be certain was real. He checked the electrical panel on the east wall. Normal. He checked the hallway near the laundry room where old buildings often had wiring problems. Normal. He took the stairs to the second floor. The smell was slightly stronger here. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough to move the needle from possible to probable in the part of his mind that had been running threat assessments since the moment he first noticed it. He walked the second floor hallway slowly. Checked the fire extinguisher mounting still in place, seal intact. Checked the emergency exit sign, working. Checked the pull station on the wall, undisturbed. Tried to remember the last inspection report for this building and realized he'd never seen one. Maintenance contract was recent. He hadn't been here before today. He didn't know the building. That thought landed in his chest with a small, specific weight. I don't know this building. He had spent his entire adult life, first the professional years, Then the years he'd spent refusing to think about the professional years, believing that knowing a building was survival. Structural layout, load-bearing walls, weak points, entry routes and exit routes, and the places where fire moved fastest and slowest, depending on the age of the materials, the quality of the original construction, the modifications that had been made over decades by people who may or may not have known what they were doing. The Hargrove Arms was built in 1987. He knew that from the work order. 37 years of patches and modifications, and the kind of quiet deterioration that old buildings accumulate, the way old people accumulate. Small aches, so gradually that nobody notices until something breaks. He took the stairs to the third floor, and the moment he pushed through the stairwell door, he knew. The smell hit him with a clarity that removed every remaining doubt. Not burning food, not a space heater. Electrical fire moving inside the walls, and it had been building for a while. He pulled out his phone. He was already dialing 911 when the alarm went off. The sound of a building fire alarm is not like anything else. People who have never experienced sometimes imagine it as a loud, startling noise, the kind of sound that interrupts and redirects the way. A smoke detector going off in a kitchen makes you rush over and wave a dish towel. That's not what it is. A building alarm is physical. It fills the space completely from floor to ceiling, and it vibrates in your sternum and your eardrum simultaneously, and it carries inside it underneath the mechanical sound, a very specific kind of communication that human beings have understood since the first of us stood around the first fire and realized that fire does not negotiate. Get out. Get out now. Get out while you still can. The hallway on the third floor went from quiet to chaos in approximately 4 seconds. Doors opened. People spilled into the hallway in varying states of confusion and undress. A man in a bathrobe, 2 college-age women still holding their phones. An older couple moving carefully but quickly toward the stairwell, the man's hand on the woman's back guiding her. A child's voice panicked, "Dad, where are we going?" A door slamming, someone shouting in Spanish. The collective urgent shuffle of people who understood the alarm but hadn't yet processed that this was real, that this was not a test, not a glitch, not someone burning microwave popcorn on the second floor. Daniel pressed himself against the wall as people moved past him toward the stairs. He was already on the phone with 911. "This is Daniel Carter. I'm at the Hargrove Arms apartment complex on West Side Drive in Denver. I'm reporting a potential structural electrical fire. The building alarm has just activated. I'm on the third floor. Residents are evacuating. I need fire units as fast as you can get them here." The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. "Sir, are you evacuating the building?" "I'm accounting for residents first." A pause. "Sir, you need to evacuate. I've got firefighting background. I'm not leaving until I know everyone's out." He pulled the phone from his ear and counted the doors in the hallway. 12 units on the third floor. He could see people coming out of 8 of them. 4 doors closed. He moved toward the first, knocked hard. "Fire alarm, is anyone in there?" 30 seconds. Nothing. He moved to the second. Knocked. "Fire alarm, building evacuation." The door opened immediately. A young man, maybe 19. Headphones around his neck, looking irritated more than frightened. "Seriously? Is this a drill?" "It's not a drill. Take the stairs to the left. Go." The kid looked at him for a half second, with the particular expression of someone evaluating whether to take instructions from a stranger covered in boiler room grease. Something in Daniel's face apparently settled it. He went. Third door. Knocked hard. "Fire alarm. Anyone home?" Nothing. He put his hand flat against the door. Not hot. He checked the gap at the floor. No visible smoke. He moved on. Fourth door. Unit 3F. The end of the hallway corner unit, where the building's east wall met the south wall. He knocked. "Fire alarm, building evacuation. Is anyone?" "Help." The word was so quiet he almost missed it. Almost. Daniel stopped breathing. "Hello." He knocked again, harder. "Is someone in there?" A pause. Then slightly louder, but still terrifyingly weak. "I can't, my leg. I can't get up." He tried the door handle. Locked. He pressed his hand against the door. not warm. He looked down the hallway. The last of the evacuating residents were disappearing into the stairwell. The building was almost empty. Almost. He looked back at the door. "What's your name?" he said loud and clear. A long pause. Then, Sophia. "Sophia, I'm Daniel. I'm going to get you out. I need you to tell me, can you get to the door? Can you unlock it?" Another pause longer, and in the silence, he could hear her breathing, labored uneven, the particular sound of someone fighting against pain and losing ground. "I tried," she said. "I fell. I can't get back up. My leg is—" Her voice cracked. "There's something on my leg." Daniel looked at the door. He looked at the lock. He thought about the property manager's voicemail, about the 911 dispatcher telling him to evacuate, about his daughter at his sister's house waiting for him to call at bedtime, about the promise he had made himself quietly and completely 5 years ago when he came home from the hospital, where they told him that his wife Sarah wasn't going to wake up. The promise that said, "No more." That said, "Emma needs you alive." That said, "You are done running into burning buildings, Daniel Carter, and you are going to stay done." I thought about all of it in approximately 1 second. Then he stepped back, raised his right leg, and drove the heel of his boot into the door just below the lock. The door gave on the second kick. The smell hit him first, stronger here, sharper, the electrical burning now mixed with something else, something warmer. And when he looked at the far wall, he saw the thin line of smoke seeping through the baseboard near the floor. Not dramatic. Not a movie fire. Just the quiet, steady evidence of something burning inside the wall that separated Unit 3F from the building's eastern infrastructure. He gave himself 2 seconds to read the room. Living area to his left. Kitchen straight ahead. Hallway to the right, presumably leading to the bedroom. The layout was a standard corner unit. He had looked at enough apartments to know the rough geometry without needing a blueprint. "Sophia." His voice was controlled, deliberate. Not panicked, because panic was the one thing he absolutely could not afford right now. "Keep talking. Where are you?" "Hallway," she said. Her voice came from the right, near the bedroom door. He moved. She was on the floor beside an overturned storage shelf. One of those tall, freestanding units people buy at discount furniture stores. Particle board and metal brackets. The kind that comes with an instruction sheet that says in 4 languages to anchor it to the wall. This one had not been anchored to the wall. It had toppled in the rush toward the front door, and when it fell, one of its corners had caught Sophia's left shin and pinned it against the baseboard. She was sitting upright against the wall, both hands pressed to the floor, trying to push herself free. Her face was pale, not the theatrical pallor of movies, but the real, bloodless gray of genuine physical shock. She looked up at him. He would never be able to fully describe what happened in that moment. The moment when she looked up and he looked down, and she saw that he was a stranger, covered in grease and dust, who had kicked in her door and was now crouching over her in a smoke-thickening hallway, while a fire burned somewhere inside the walls. She didn't scream. She didn't pull away. She just looked at him with eyes that were exhausted and frightened, and still underneath all of it extremely alert. "You actually came," she said. "I told you I would. You told me 20 seconds ago. I keep my word fast." He was already assessing the shelf. Heavy, probably 80 pounds, fully loaded with the books and boxes still scattered across the floor around it. The corner piece was pressing on her shin just above the ankle. Not ideal. He couldn't tell if anything was broken without a proper look, and this was not the time for a proper look. "Sophia, I'm going to lift this. When it moves, I need you to pull your leg toward you. Can you do that?" She tested her leg, winced sharply. "I don't know." "That means yes," he said. "Ready." She looked at him for a half second. "Ready," she said. He lifted. The shelf groaned and shifted. Books slid off the remaining shelves and hit the floor. He got it up 2 inches, 4 inches 6 enough to clear the pressure point, and Sophia pulled hard, and her leg came free with a sound that she absorbed with a clenched jaw and both hands pressing into the floor. Daniel set the shelf down carefully. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." "My shoe." He looked. Her left shoe had come off during the struggle. He picked it up and handed it to her without comment, and she took it, and he watched her jaw tighten as she bent forward to put it on, and he noted that she put it on anyway. She wasn't going to make this harder than it needed to be. He appreciated that more than he had words for. "Can you stand?" She tried. Made it halfway. Her left leg buckled and she grabbed the wall. "Okay," he said. He moved to her left side, put her arm across his shoulders, and wrapped his right arm around her waist. "Hold on. Don't try to carry your own weight on that side. Just use me." "I'm not—" "You're not what?" A pause. "I was going to say, I'm not some I don't need to be carried." "Good, because I didn't say carry. I said hold on. There's a difference." He looked at the hallway ahead. The smoke near the baseboard was thicker now. Not wall to wall, not obscuring visibility, yet but moving, growing. "And we need to have this conversation while we're walking." She half laughed, a short, involuntary sound that seemed to surprise her. They started moving. The hallway outside her unit was different from how it had been 3 minutes ago. The difference wasn't dramatic, but Daniel felt it immediately in the way that the air moved against his face, the temperature slightly elevated, the smoke slightly more present, the light from the hallway fixtures slightly harder to see through. Fire moved through old buildings, the way water moved through cracks. Not always visibly, not always loudly. Sometimes almost patiently finding the paths of least resistance, the gaps between floors, the chases where old wiring ran the spaces inside walls, where insulation had compressed over decades into something that burned slowly and thoroughly, and without drama, until it didn't. The Hargrove Arms had been built in 1987. 37 years of residence, 37 years of modifications, repairs, additions, and all the small improvised decisions that accumulated inside walls where nobody ever looked. Daniel was running a calculation in his head that he hadn't run in 5 years, and he was disturbed by how quickly it came back. "Main stairwell is left," he said. "I know," Sophia said. "That's where I was going when the shelf—" "We're not using the main stairwell." She glanced at him. "Why?" He didn't answer immediately, because the answer required him to explain that the smoke pattern he was reading in the ceiling above them, thin tracking from east to west, told him the fire was moving along the east wall, which meant the space between the third floor and the main stairwell's upper shaft was probably the most dangerous corridor in the building right now. And explaining that required explaining how he knew how to read smoke patterns, and that was a conversation for later. "The other stairwell," he said. "Emergency exit, west end." She didn't argue. He registered this as significant. Most people in crisis argued. It wasn't stubbornness. It was fear manifesting as the need to reassert control, to push back against an unfamiliar situation by questioning unfamiliar decisions. He had seen it dozens of times. Sophia Reynolds, leaning against him in a smoke-thickening hallway, with a leg she couldn't fully trust, didn't argue. She just said, "That way. That way." They moved. The hallway felt longer than it was. That was another thing Daniel remembered, how time and distance stretched in a crisis, how the brain processed everything more slowly and more intensely, simultaneously. How 40 feet could feel like 400. He kept his breathing controlled, and his eyes moving ceiling floor walls, the gap at the base of each door they passed. Sophia was limping badly, but she was moving her arm, locked across his shoulders, her weight shifting as much as she could manage to her right side. "Are you a firefighter?" she asked. "Not anymore." "What does that mean?" "It means not anymore." She was quiet for a beat. Then, "But you know what you're doing." It wasn't a question. "I know what I'm doing," he said. The smoke was thickening. He could feel it in the back of his throat, the slight sting that preceded the deeper irritation that preceded impairment. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out the work rag he'd been using in the boiler room, not clean, but better than nothing, and pressed it against her face. "Hold that over your nose and mouth." She took it without question. He pulled his own jacket collar up over his nose and kept moving. 20 feet. 15. 10. The emergency exit stairwell door was ahead. A gray metal door with a horizontal push bar, the kind that set off a secondary alarm when opened, because buildings built in 1987 had building codes that required them, and this particular door still had its original hardware. Daniel reached for the push bar, and then the ceiling above them cracked. Not broke, not fell, cracked. A sound like a rifle shot, sharp and definitive, coming from directly overhead. The structural sound of a load-bearing element being compromised by heat. One of the support members above the drop ceiling tiles, flexing under stress that hadn't been there 60 seconds ago. Sophia made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Daniel hit the push bar. The door swung open. The secondary alarm added its voice to the building's general screaming. He pushed Sophia through, first stepped through after her, and let the door close behind them. The stairwell was cleaner, cooler. The smoke here was minimal present, but not the thickened corridor air they'd just moved through. The secondary system in the east stairwell apparently had a better seal. He gave himself half a second to breathe. Sophia was leaning against the railing, her rag-covered hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes above it still alert, still watching him. "Down?" she asked. "Down." They started on the stairs. He kept her on his left, his arm around her waist, her hand on the railing, her weight redistributed across both of them. He watched her feet, watched the way her left ankle turned slightly inward under pressure, the compensating way her right knee bent to absorb what the left side couldn't. She was managing. She was in pain, and she was managing. They made the second floor landing, then the first. Daniel pushed open the ground floor exit door, and cold February air hit him like a wall. Clean. Bitterly cold. Real. He felt Sophia's grip on his shoulder tighten, not from pain, he thought, but from something else. The release of something she'd been holding the entire time they were inside. They came out into the parking lot at the building's west side, away from the main entrance where the crowd was gathered. Daniel could already hear the sirens not far now, getting closer fast. He looked up and saw the first visible smoke beginning to push from a third-floor window on the east corner. Unit 3F, where Sophia lived. She was looking at it too. "My laptop," she said quietly. "My drawings." He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. 5 years of project files, she said. Her voice was steady, the particular steadiness of someone who was choosing steadiness, because the alternative was something they couldn't afford right now. "Everything I've been working on." He looked at her. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She was watching her apartment produce smoke into the February night, and she was choosing deliberately and visibly to stand there and hold herself together. He thought about Sarah. He thought about Emma. He thought about 5 years of learning to do exactly what Sophia Reynolds was doing right now. "Are you hurt anywhere besides the leg?" he asked. She turned to look at him. Really look at him the way she hadn't had time to in the chaos inside. She took in the work jacket, the grease, the collar he'd used as a mask, the faint red marks on his hands where the heat had found the exposed skin. "You burned your hands," she said. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." He almost smiled. "Minor," he said. "Both hands. Nothing that needs tonight." She was still looking at him with that same clear-eyed attention she'd had on the floor of her hallway. The look of someone whose brain was still running at full speed, even while the rest of her was starting to come undone. "Who are you?" she asked. And he said for the second time that night, and still without full explanation, "Daniel Carter. I do building maintenance." The first fire truck pulled into the parking lot. The lights swept across both of them, red and white and urgent, painting the parking lot in alternating flashes. And Daniel watched the firefighters move, and felt something inside him shift and ache and resolve all at once. A complicated private earthquake that he had no intention of sharing with anyone standing in that parking lot. He put his hands in his pockets. He watched them work. And somewhere across the city, his 8-year-old daughter was doing a science project at her aunt's house, waiting for her father to call. He pulled out his phone. He dialed Linda's number. "Hey," Linda answered. "You still at the job?" He looked at the burning building, at the firefighters, at Sophia Reynolds sitting on the hood of a car 10 feet away, her jaw still set, her eyes still clear, her left hand resting on a leg that had carried her out of a building that was now finishing the job of destroying everything she'd left inside it. "Yeah," Daniel said. I'm still at the job. Emma wants to say goodnight. Put her on. A shuffle of sound. Then his daughter's voice. 8 years old and entirely completely uncomplicated. Dad, are you okay? You sound weird. He turned away from the building, faced the dark end of the parking lot where the lights didn't reach. I'm okay, baby, he said. Tell me about your project. She did. He listened. He stood in the freezing parking lot of a building that was still burning with smoke-dried eyes and burned hands, and the particular weight of a man who has just done something he promised himself he would never do again, and he listened to his daughter tell him about volcanoes. Later he would try to explain to himself why he had gone in. Not to Emma, not to Marcus, not to the property management company that called him the next morning to express concern and make sure he wasn't planning to sue. Not to the journalists who found out somehow because journalists always found out somehow and left voicemails he never returned. Just to himself in the quiet of his house at 2 a.m. when Emma was asleep and the kitchen was dark and his bandaged hands were wrapped around a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. Why had he gone in? He had told himself for 5 years that the promise he made mattered. He had told himself, but it lived by it, built a whole quiet, careful life around it. That choosing Emma meant choosing to not be the man who ran into burning buildings. That the two things were incompatible. That being a father first meant being a rescuer never. And then a woman said, I can't move, and he kicked in a door. He sat at his kitchen table and looked at his bandaged hands. I thought about something his instructor at the rescue training program had told him once, a big, unhurried man named Wallace, who had been doing structural emergency work for 30 years when Daniel met him, and who had a way of saying things that didn't announce themselves as important, until you found yourself remembering them years later at 2 a.m. The training doesn't go away, Wallace had said. You can leave the job. The job doesn't leave you. That's not a curse. It's just what it is. Daniel hadn't understood that then. He sat at his kitchen table with burned hands and a daughter asleep upstairs and thought he might be beginning to understand it now. The job doesn't leave you. He finished the coffee. He went upstairs. He checked on Emma, stood in the doorway of her room for a moment, the way parents do, watching the specific rise and fall of a child's breathing, the way her hand had curled under her cheek, the way her science project notes were still spread across her desk in the particular disorder of a child who had worked hard and then simply stopped mid-effort and gone to sleep. He pulled her door to. He went to his own room. He lay in the dark, and he thought about a woman on a hallway floor who had looked up at a stranger and said, without theatrics and without hesitation, you actually came. Like she had dared herself to believe someone might. Like she had almost let herself stop believing. You actually came. Daniel stared at the ceiling of his dark bedroom for a long time. Then he closed his eyes. Some things you walk away from, and some things follow you home. He didn't sleep well. That wasn't new. Daniel Carter hadn't slept well in 5 years. But the particular quality of sleeplessness that found him in the hours after the fire was different from the ordinary kind. The kind that came from a long day, from worrying about Emma's school conference, from lying awake, running through the next week's work schedule. This was older. Familiar in a way that felt like putting on a coat you hadn't worn in years, and finding that it still fit, still smelled the same, still had the same weight across your shoulders. I was awake at 4:15. The room was dark, and the house was quiet, and his hands ached under the bandages the paramedic had wrapped them in before he refused further treatment and signed a release form that the young man clearly felt uncomfortable letting him sign. Sir, these are second degree. Minor second degree. I know the difference. The difference matters. I know that too. He held the pen out. I have a daughter I need to get home to. I'll see a doctor tomorrow. The paramedic looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the form. Then he handed Daniel his copy and went to help somebody who was willing to be helped. Daniel sat in the dark of his room now and flexed his hands slowly, measuring the pain the way you measured any tool, not with feeling, but with information. The right hand was worse. The left would be manageable by morning. He'd been hurt worse doing work that paid less and mattered less, and he'd functioned through all of it. He got up at 4:30 because lying there wasn't doing anything useful. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. He pulled out the small spiral notebook he kept in his work jacket and looked at the maintenance notes he'd taken at the Hargrove Arms before the night went sideways. Pressure valve specs. Estimated parts cost. Recommended follow-up timeline. The kind of notes that assumed the building would still be there to follow up on. He closed the notebook. He thought about Sophia Reynolds. Not in any complicated way. Not yet. He thought about her the way you thought about anyone. You'd pulled out of something bad with the specific residual awareness of a person. You'd been responsible for whose breathing and weight and pain level you'd been tracking with the whole of your attention for what felt like much longer than it actually was. He thought about the way she'd said you actually came. Like she'd been alone for long enough that surprise was her default setting. He thought about her sitting on the hood of that car, watching smoke come out of her apartment window, her jaw set and her hand resting on a leg that hurt, and 5 years of project files disappearing into a February night. He thought, I hope she had someone to call. And then he thought about who had been there when the fire trucks came, when the crowd gathered in the parking lot, and people started finding each other, finding their neighbors, their friends, the familiar faces that made a crisis bearable. He hadn't watched to see if anyone found Sophia. He'd been on the phone with his daughter. He sat with that for a moment. Then he drank his coffee and told himself it wasn't his business. She was out. She was alive. She had a paramedic and firefighters, and eventually she would have all the systems that came after a disaster insurance adjusters and Red Cross volunteers and building management making apologetic calls. She would be fine. She would be fine because she was the kind of person who looked at you from the floor with a pinned leg and still processed the situation clearly enough to confirm her location, communicate her injury, and accept help without wasting time on pride. That kind of person was always fine eventually. He got up to refill his coffee. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Marcus. 6:47 in the morning. You saw the news, Daniel said. I saw the news, Marcus said. You want to explain to me why my boss is on the Channel 7 website? Daniel put the coffee down. What? Eyewitness video, parking lot. Someone got you coming out of the building with that woman. A pause. Daniel, what did you do? I got her out. You went into a burning building. It was early stage. It was a building that was on fire, Daniel. I know what it was. Silence on the line. Not the ordinary Marcus silence, the thinking kind. This was heavier. The kind that had something serious behind it. You okay? Marcus finally said. Hands are a little burned. I said, are you okay? Not are you physically intact? Daniel leaned against the counter, looked out the window at the backyard, still dark, still February. The bare tree his daughter had named Gerald, for reasons she'd never fully explained, standing in its usual position near the fence. I'm okay, he said. You don't sound okay. I sound like a man who didn't sleep much. Daniel. Marcus. Another pause. Then Marcus quieter. Was it like before being in there? The question landed with more precision than Daniel appreciated. He turned away from the window. Yes and no, he said. Which part was no? He thought about it. Actually thought instead of deflecting. When I was doing the work, he said. When I was moving through the building and making decisions, that part didn't feel like anything. It just felt like the next thing and the next thing. Same as always. And the yes part. After. He paused. After is when it got complicated. Marcus seemed to understand that this was as much as he was going to get right now. He'd been working with Daniel for 3 years. He understood the architecture of Daniel's silences. Rodriguez is handling the Bellevue contract today, he said, shifting. I cleared your morning. You should go see a doctor about those hands. I was going to. You were going to do it in between 12 other things. I cleared your morning. Go first thing. Daniel almost argued. He didn't. Thanks, he said. And Daniel. Marcus hesitated. The woman you got out. Is she all right? He thought about the parking lot, the car hood, the jaw that wouldn't stop being set. She's tough, he said. Yeah, she's all right. He hung up. He looked at the Channel 7 website. Someone had caught them coming out the emergency exit door, a shaky cell phone video, the kind taken from 30 or 40 feet away in bad light, that somehow managed to capture the moment he pushed through the door with his arm around Sophia's waist. The headline was exactly the kind of thing he'd been hoping to avoid: Hero Father Rescues Woman from Burning Denver Apartment. He closed the browser. I went to check on Emma. She was still asleep, sprawled diagonally across her bed, in the way that 8-year-olds occupied space, completely unselfconsciously, without concern for geometry or convention. Her volcano notes were still on his desk. A half-eaten granola bar sat on her nightstand, next to a library book about deep-sea creatures that she had been requesting be read to her for 3 weeks, despite being entirely capable of reading it herself. Daniel stood in her doorway. I thought, this is what I came home for. He thought, and it's still here. He went to get ready. He did not think about what it meant that walking into that burning building had felt for about 15 minutes, like the most natural thing he had done in 5 years. He was very careful not to think about that. At least not yet. The doctor he saw at the urgent care clinic on Wadsworth Boulevard was a compact, efficient woman named Dr. Okonkwo, who unwrapped his hands, looked at the burns with the same focused attention. A mechanic gave a problem engine, and then looked up at him over the rims of her glasses. You were in a fire, she said. Building fire, last night. And you didn't come in last night because my daughter needed me home. She held his gaze for 3 seconds, then returned to his hands without commenting. He appreciated that. Right hand is a more significant second degree than minor, she said. Left is manageable. You'll want to keep them covered for 10 to 14 days. The right hand you should be careful with for the next month. I do maintenance work. I know. I'm telling you to be careful not to stop. She began rewrapping. You've had burns before. It wasn't a question. She was reading the old scar tissue, the way Marcus read pressure gauges, methodically, accurately drawing the right conclusion. Occupational, he said. Former firefighter. He paused a half-second too long. Building maintenance, he said. She didn't push. But when she handed him his aftercare instructions, and he stood to leave, she said without looking up from her desk. What you did last night was on the news this morning. He stopped. Channel 7, she said. My nurse had it on in the break room. She looked up then. The woman you got out is at Presbyterian. She had a fracture in her fibula. She's stable. A beat. I thought you'd want to know. He stood in the doorway of the exam room. He didn't know what to say. He said thank you. I was back in his truck before he fully processed the information. Fractured fibula. She'd walked on that, or tried to, the entire time they were moving through the building. The entire time she'd been half supporting herself, redistributing her weight, saying I can't, and then doing it anyway. He sat in his truck in the urgent care parking lot for a moment. Then he drove to Presbyterian Hospital. He told himself it was just to check, that it was the right thing, that walking out of a burning building with someone didn't mean you left them to handle the fallout alone. He told himself it wasn't more than that. He was, as it turned out, incorrect. The nurse at the third-floor desk looked up his name, the one from the fire, the news, the parking lot video, and then looked at Daniel with the particular expression of someone who had been told something and was now confirming it with her own eyes. She said you might come, the nurse said. He blinked. She said, and I'm quoting, if a man named Daniel Carter shows up, looking like he doesn't know if he should be here, tell him yes, he should. The nurse was trying not to smile. Room 312. Go ahead. Sophia Reynolds was sitting up in the hospital bed with her left leg immobilized and a laptop on her bed tray. That was not her laptop. It was thinner, newer, still showing a setup screen, and she was talking on the phone with the flat-focused voice of someone who was managing 6 problems simultaneously and had been for approximately the last 12 hours. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway. She held up one finger one moment, and he nodded and waited. Yes, that's what I said. I need the Meridian project files by noon because the cloud backup should have synced through Tuesday evening, and I need to know what's recoverable before I call the clients. A pause. I understand, Jordan. I understand it's early. It's also a situation. Another pause, shorter. Good, thank you. Call me when you have it. She hung up. She looked at Daniel standing in the doorway with bandaged hands and a jacket that still had traces of smoke smell and the overall bearing of a man who had convinced himself he was just stopping by. "You came," she said. "You predicted I would," he said. "I predicted a 50-50 shot. You beat the odds." She gestured at the chair beside the bed. "Sit down. You look like you've been standing since yesterday." He sat, up close in daylight, or the artificial daylight of a hospital room. Sophia Reynolds was different from the woman on the hallway floor and the woman on the car hood. Those versions had been compressed by crisis. This version was more complicated. She had dark circles under eyes that were sharp and evaluating. Her hair was loose, still carrying traces of the smoke they'd both been breathing. She was managing the new laptop and a phone, and what he assumed was a significant amount of pain in her left leg, with the brisk, unapologetic efficiency of someone who had decided the situation was what it was, and was not going to spend energy being dramatic about it. She also kept looking at his hands. "The doctor said right hand is worse," he said before she could ask. "Mine is a fractured fibula," she said. "Stable fracture, 6 to 8 weeks. She said it the way you reported weather. I walked on it for about 5 minutes. Closer to 8. Was it?" She seemed to calculate. "I didn't notice. I was focused on other things." She paused. "You knew." "That it was fractured, no. I knew it was significant. But you didn't say anything. Would that have helped?" She considered this seriously. "No," she said. "Probably not." She set the new laptop aside, looked at him directly. "Why did you stay in the building?" The question landed clean and quick without preamble. He held it for a moment. "You were in it," he said. "You didn't know that when you went in." "No, but I knew someone might be." He shifted in the chair. "I smelled the fire before the alarm went off. I was checking rooms, making sure everyone was out. You were the last room. And if I hadn't been there, then I would have come out the front with everyone else." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. He had the feeling of being read assess the way she might have studied a structural drawing, looking for load-bearing elements, looking for the places where things were stronger than they appeared. "You're not going to tell me the rest," she said. "What rest?" "The part that explains how a building maintenance supervisor moved through a burning building like someone who had done it 100 times. She kept her eyes on him. "The part that explains why you knew to avoid the east stairwell. How you found the maintenance passage. How you knew where the fire was moving before it got there." He was quiet. "I had a good training program," he said. She let that sit between them for a moment. Then she said, "I design buildings for a living, Daniel. I know what building maintenance training looks like, and I know what structural emergency training looks like. Those are not the same thing." A pause. "You knew that building was going to go east before it did. You made decisions in there that a very specific kind of training produces. And whatever that training was, you have it, and you've had it for a long time." She paused again. "You can tell me it's none of my business." I thought about saying exactly that. He said, "Not in a hospital room." Something shifted in her expression, not satisfaction exactly, but acknowledgement. The look of someone who had asked a real question and gotten an honest non-answer, which was more than she'd expected. "Fair enough," she said. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. The focus snapped back into her expression, the working mode, the managing mode. "Jordan has the backup files," she said. "I need to look at these, but stay if you can." She looked up from the phone. "I have more questions, and I imagine you might too." He looked at her. He looked at the door. He thought about his cleared morning, about Marcus running things until noon, about Emma at school until 3:15. "I can stay for a while," he said. She nodded. Went back to the laptop. The room was quiet, except for the distant hospital sounds, hallway voices, a cart rolling, a PA system doing its work. And Daniel sat in the chair beside the bed of a woman he had known for approximately 14 hours, and he felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years, something that was not quite comfort, but was in the same family, something that had to do with being in the right place at the right time and not running from it for once. I didn't examine it. He just let it be there. After about 10 minutes, Sophia said without looking up from the screen, "You should eat something. You look like you haven't." "I had coffee." "That's not the same thing." "I know. There's a cafeteria on the second floor. The egg sandwiches are actually edible." "That's not a joke," I asked the nurse. He looked at her. She was still looking at the screen. "How long have you been managing the nurses?" he asked. "About 4 hours." She glanced up. "They're good. I just prefer knowing the situation." A small pause. "Go eat. I'll still be here." He went. He came back with 2 egg sandwiches and 2 coffees and set one of each on her bed tray without comment. She looked at it, then at him, and something in her expression moved in a way she didn't entirely seem to intend. "You didn't have to. You knew the cafeteria situation," he said. "Seemed fair." She picked up the coffee. He ate. For a while, neither of them said anything. The morning came in through the window in the way February mornings did. In Denver, pale clear, carrying the specific quality of light that came after a cold night, the kind that made everything look cleaned down and factual. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. Marcus Rodriguez locked the keys in the van. "I'm handling it. Don't worry about it." "How are the hands?" He typed back. "Manageable." "Don't tell Rodriguez I know." "Marcus, I'll let him suffer appropriately. Go home and rest." He put the phone away. "Wife?" Sophia asked without particular inflection. He looked up. "Just reading your face," she said. When the phone buzzed, you relaxed, then tensed, then smiled. The sequence suggested someone you care about but also feel responsible for. "My employee," he said. He locked his keys in the van. "Ah." She took a bite of the egg sandwich. Considered. The nurse mentioned a daughter, Emma, 8 years old. "Her mother." He paused. Sophia seemed to register the pause because she said immediately, "You don't have to." "She died," he said. 5 years ago." The room went quiet with it. Not an uncomfortable quiet. The kind that had respect in it. "I'm sorry," Sophia said. And she said it the way people sometimes did, without the automatic forward momentum, without rushing to fill the space after it. She just said it, and let it mean what it meant. He nodded. They went back to their respective silences. After a while, Sophia said, "My parents divorced when I was 9. My mother raised me. She worked 3 jobs at certain points." She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at something in the middle distance, the kind of looking that meant she was deciding how much to say. "She used to tell me that the thing about hard things is they either make you smaller or they make you more of what you already were." A pause. "I didn't understand that until I was about 30. He looked at her. She looked back. "What made you start understanding it at 30? He asked. "The building I designed collapsed during construction." Design flaw. My flaw. Nobody died. We caught it before that, but it was close enough that I understood what close meant. She said this plainly, without self-pity and without armor, just the clean presentation of a true thing. I went smaller for about a year. Then I went back to work. And I'm better at it now than I was before. She picked up her coffee. Fear makes some people careful. Some people it just breaks. She looked at him. "You're careful, aren't you? That's what all the maintenance is. The deliberate, thorough show up and follow through." He looked at her for a long moment. "Yeah," he said. "Something like that." "You went into that building last night." "I did." "That doesn't sound like someone who chose careful." He set his own coffee down. "I chose careful for 5 years," he said. "And then a woman said she couldn't move, and it turned out careful wasn't the relevant thing anymore." Sophia held his gaze. Something in her expression changed, shifted the way things shifted when understanding arrived at a different level than it had been operating before. "You gave it up," she said. "The rescue work, after she died." He didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. The question answered itself. "You blamed yourself," she said. Not accusatory, just accurate. "I blamed the job," he said. "Which is different." "Is it?" Another quiet. This one slightly less comfortable. "I'm not sure anymore," he said. It was the most honest thing he had said to another adult in approximately 2 years, and it arrived in the hospital room without announcement and without him being entirely certain he'd intended to say it. Sophia looked at him. "Well," she said quietly, "last night you were better at that job than anyone who showed up with the actual equipment." He looked away. "The firefighters knew what they were doing," he said. "I know they did. I'm not diminishing that." Her voice was steady. "I'm saying you knew what you were doing too. In the dark. In the heat. With no equipment and no backup and no plan except to find whoever was in there and get them out." She paused. "That doesn't go away, Daniel. That's not something you walk away from." He thought about what his old instructor Wallace had said. "The training doesn't go away. You can leave the job. The job doesn't leave you." He thought about standing in his kitchen at 2 in the morning with burned hands and a cup of coffee. "No," he said. "I'm starting to think it doesn't." His phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He frowned at it. Let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, the voicemail notification appeared. He listened. "Mr. Carter, this is Jennifer Hawks from the Denver Post. I'm working on a story about last night's fire at the Hargrove Arms apartment complex, and I wanted to reach out to you regarding your role in the rescue. If you could call me back at your earliest." He deleted it. Sophia was watching him. "Reporter," she asked. "Denver Post." "They called me an hour ago," she said. "And Channel 4 before that." "What did you say?" "I said I was recovering and unavailable for comment." She paused. "What are you going to say?" "Same thing." She nodded, looked out the window, then said quietly, "They're going to write it anyway. They have the video." "I know." "You can't stop the story." "I know that too." He looked at her. "But I can choose not to be part of telling it." She seemed to think about that. "Why?" she asked. "Most people would want—" "I'm not most people. I know you're not." A pause. "That's what I'm asking about." He looked at the bandaged hands in his lap. He thought about Emma. I thought about what it would mean for his daughter to go to school and have her classmates tell her her father was on the news. He thought about what it would mean to explain to her, to his sister Linda, to Marcus, to all the quiet, ordinary people who made up the ordinary life he had built, what had actually happened and why and who he had been before he decided to be only a building maintenance supervisor and a father, and nothing more complicated than that. I thought about how long he had been telling that story to himself, and sitting in this hospital room in this pale February light, with a woman who had walked on a fractured leg because stopping wasn't a choice she was willing to make. He felt the story shift, just slightly, just enough to let some air in. "My wife died on a rescue operation," he said. Sophia went very still. She wasn't a firefighter, she wasn't trained, but she went into a building to try to help someone, a neighbor, an elderly woman from her street, and the structure went before anyone could get to her. He said this evenly, with the practiced flatness of something that had been held for a long time and had calcified into a form that could be spoken without breaking anything. "I was 3 blocks away on a different call. I got the radio signal, and I drove there, and it was already over." Sophia said nothing. "Emma was 3 years old," he said. A long silence. "After that," he said, "I made a decision. Emma needed me alive more than strangers needed me capable, so I stopped." He looked up. It seemed like the right math. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "And last night." He held her gaze. "Last night." He said, "The math was the same. I just did it faster." She looked at him for a long time. "She would have gone in too," Sophia said quietly. "Your wife." It wasn't a question. It was the kind of statement that arrived from reading a person carefully and arriving at a certainty. He looked down. "Yeah," he said. "She would have." "So you didn't just lose her," Sophia said. "You lost the version of yourself that got to be like her." He was quiet for a long time. Outside, the hospital hallway moved with its ordinary business. Feet on linoleum. A cart. A conversation in low voices. The world going on doing what the world always did not. Stopping, not slowing, not caring about the particular weight of what was being said in room 312. He picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. "You're good at this," he said. "At what?" "At seeing into things." He paused. "It's a little unnerving." For the first time since he'd walked into the room, Sophia Reynolds smiled. It was a real smile, not the managed expression controlled presentation version. A real one. It changed her face the way genuine things always did. "I'm an architect," she said. "I look at structures. People have them too." He thought about that. He thought about the structure of the last 5 years. I thought about last night and the door, and the way his body had moved before his mind finished making the decision. He was still thinking about it when his phone buzzed again. This time the number on the screen made him pause. It was a Colorado area code he didn't recognize, but the prefix was one he knew. He'd known it for 15 years. It was the same prefix used by the Denver Fire Department administrative offices. He looked at the phone, Sophia watching his expression. Different kind of call this time. "I don't know yet," he said. He answered it. "Daniel Carter." The voice on the other end was male, maybe 50s, carrying the particular unhurried authority of someone who was used to being listened to. "My name is Chief Robert Ellison, Denver Fire District 7. I believe you were at the Hargrove Arms last night." Daniel straightened slightly in the chair. "I was," he said. "I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee, Mr. Carter," the chief said. "I think we have some things worth talking about." Daniel looked across the bed tray at Sophia Reynolds. She was watching him with that clear, structural look. He looked at the phone. He thought about the cleared morning that was almost gone. About Emma at school. About 5 years of careful, ordinary decisions. "When?" he said. "Whenever you're ready," the chief said. "I'll wait." Daniel lowered the phone. The February light came through the hospital window, steady and factual and indifferent. And somewhere in the back of his mind, something that had been very still for 5 years began very quietly to stir. Chief Robert Ellison was not what Daniel expected. He had expected brass. He had expected the particular kind of administrative authority that sat behind a desk and understood fire, the way accountants understood money as a variable to be managed, a liability to be minimized, a number on a report. He had met that kind of chief before in his previous life, and he had respected them the way you respected a necessary function, without particularly warming to it. Robert Ellison was 61 years old, built like a man who had spent 30 years doing physical work and then spent the next 10 years trying to sit still at a desk and never quite succeeding. He had the hands of someone who still went into buildings. He had eyes that moved the way Daniel's moved, always checking exits, always reading the room, always running the quiet background calculation of a person who had been trained to notice what most people missed. I was already at the coffee shop on Colfax when Daniel arrived at 1:15 that afternoon. He had chosen a corner table. His back was to the wall. He had a plain black coffee, and he had not touched it. Daniel sat down across from him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They were doing what men of a certain kind always did when they first encountered each other, not measuring exactly. More like calibrating. Getting a read without committing to a position yet. Ellison spoke first. "You look better than the video suggested." "The video was shot in bad light," Daniel said. "The video was shot by a 20-year-old with a cell phone who was very excited about what she was seeing," Ellison said. "It's been watched 400,000 times since this morning." Daniel wrapped his bandaged hands around the coffee mug a waitress had set down without being asked, and said nothing. "You want to tell me what you were doing in that building?" Ellison said. "I had a maintenance contract, hot water system. I was there on a work order." "And you stayed?" "I smelled smoke. Before the alarm." "Yes." Ellison looked at him steadily. "The fire investigator's preliminary report says the ignition point was in the electrical chase behind the east wall on the 3rd floor. It had probably been smoldering inside the wall for 40 minutes before the alarm activated." He paused. "Most people in that building would not have smelled anything in those 40 minutes. Daniel said nothing. "I looked you up," Ellison said. There it was. Daniel kept his expression neutral. He'd been expecting this. He'd been expecting it since the phone rang in Sophia's hospital room, and he'd had 50 minutes in the truck to prepare for it. He thought he was prepared. He discovered he was not entirely prepared. Daniel Carter. Ellison said, not reading from anything, reciting from memory, which was somehow worse. Certified Structural Emergency Rescue Specialist, Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control, Certified 2003. Active Duty Emergency Response, Denver Metropolitan Area, 2003 through 2019. 16 years. 87 documented rescues. Served as lead instructor for Structural Emergency Protocol at the Denver Fire Training Academy from 2015 to 2019. A pause. Resigned January 2020. The coffee shop moved around them. A normal Tuesday afternoon, people with laptops. A mother with a toddler in a high chair. The sounds of ordinary life doing what it always did while complicated things happened inside of it. Your record was exceptional, Ellison said. By any measure. It was a long time ago, Daniel said. It was 5 years ago. That's a long time. Ellison looked at him. Is it? Daniel set his mug down. Chief, he said. I appreciate the call, but I think you already know why I resigned, and I think you already know that the reasons haven't changed. So if you're going to make me an offer, I'd rather you make it directly so I can decline it directly and we can both get on with our afternoon. Ellison didn't react to this. He just looked at Daniel with the patience of a man who had conducted a lot of difficult conversations and had learned that the first statement was rarely the last one. I read the incident report from 2019, Ellison said. The Maplewood fire. Daniel went very still. I know what happened to your wife, Ellison said. His voice had changed, not softer exactly, but more careful. The voice of a man who knew he was handling something that required care. Sarah Carter, 34 years old. She went into a burning residential structure on Maplewood Avenue to assist an elderly neighbor who was unable to evacuate. The structure went before rescue could reach her. He paused. You were on active deployment 3 blocks away when the call came in. The coffee shop sounds continued. The toddler laughed at something. Daniel looked at the table. I know, he said quietly. I was there. I know you were. Ellison picked up his coffee, put it down without drinking. I'm not bringing this up to reopen something that doesn't need to be opened. I'm bringing it up because I want you to understand that I understand why you left. He looked at Daniel directly. And I'm not here to tell you that you were wrong. Daniel looked up. That was not what he expected. You were a father who had just lost his wife, Ellison said. You had a 3-year-old daughter. You made a decision that the job was going to cost you what you had left, and you chose what you had left over the job. That's not a failure of commitment. That's a human being making a human decision. He paused. I've seen men stay in this work when they should have left. It destroys them by degrees. You leaving may have been the right call. Daniel was quiet. May have been, he said. May have been? Ellison confirmed. Past tense, specific to that moment. He leaned forward slightly. Last night you went into a building without gear, without backup, without a radio, in a structure you'd never been in before, and you got a woman with a fractured leg out through a maintenance passage that isn't on any map I've looked at since this morning, before my crews even had hoses on the building. He stopped. I've had 23 years of active command, Daniel. I have seen trained personnel in full gear perform worse than what you did last night. Silence. Daniel's jaw was tight. I'm not asking you to come back to active rescue, Ellison said. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not asking you to put gear on and run into buildings. You have a daughter. I have no interest in that conversation. He picked up a folded piece of paper from beside his coffee cup and slid it across the table. What I'm asking is different. Daniel looked at the paper but didn't pick it up. The city has a gap, Ellison said. In prevention, not in response. Our response teams are strong, but in prevention, in education, in getting to buildings before the thing that happened at Hargrove Arms has a chance to happen. Old buildings. Deferred maintenance. Electrical systems that should have been flagged 5 years ago and weren't because nobody with the right knowledge was looking at them. He nodded toward the paper. I've been trying to build a consulting program for 14 months. bringing specialists with structural and fire safety background into the permitting and inspection process, working with building owners, with property managers, with fire marshals, to catch the things that fall through the gaps. Daniel finally picked up the paper. He looked at it. It was a program outline. Formal, detailed, the kind that had obviously been through several rounds of revision. A civilian safety consulting role. Part-time. Flexible hours. Working with fire prevention code, enforcement and building management. He read it slowly. He set it down. "This isn't a job offer," he said. "Not exactly." "No," Ellison said. "It's an invitation. To use what you have in a way that doesn't require you to be someone you decided you couldn't be anymore." He paused. "But if you came back Daniel in any capacity, you would be preventing the next Hargrove Arms. Not responding to it. Not running into it. Preventing it." The difference in that word sat between them. Preventing, not responding. Daniel looked at the paper again. He thought about the boiler room, about the maintenance log, about the 4:30 work order and the flickering fluorescent panel he'd made a note to report, and the hot water system that had been throwing code since the weekend. He thought about the smell in the hallway, the one he'd caught because of training that other people in that building didn't have. The 40 minutes the fire had been building inside the wall before the alarm went off. The 40 minutes during which any one of a dozen inspections conducted by someone who knew what to look for could have flagged the wiring before it became a crisis. I thought about Sophia Reynolds with her fractured fibula and her project files and her managed expression in the hospital room. He picked up the paper again. "I'd need to think about it," he said. "Of course. And I'd need to talk to my daughter." Ellison looked at him. "You talk to your 8-year-old about career decisions," he said without judgment. "She's not just my daughter," Daniel said. "She's the reason for every decision I've made for 5 years. She gets a vote." Ellison was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She sounds like someone worth consulting." Daniel folded the paper and put it in his jacket pocket. He picked up his coffee. He drank it. Outside the window. February afternoon moved along Colfax Avenue, traffic and pedestrians, and the city doing its ordinary business in the ordinary way, indifferent to the fact that something was shifting in Daniel Carter at a corner table inside it. "There's something else," Ellison said. Daniel looked up. Ellison's expression had changed. The administrative authority was still there, but something behind it was different now, more careful, more personal. "The fire investigator finished his preliminary walkthrough this morning," he said. "The Hargrove Arms. You want to hear what he found? Tell me." The electrical wiring in that section of the building had been flagged in a city inspection 18 months ago, Ellison said. The property management company received a notice of required repair. They submitted documentation saying the repairs had been completed. He paused. They had not been completed. Daniel set his mug down slowly. "The wiring that started last night's fire," Ellison continued, "was the exact wiring that was supposed to have been replaced 18 months ago. The documentation the property management company submitted was falsified." The coffee shop kept moving. The toddler banged a plastic cup on the high chair tray. Daniel heard it from a very great distance. "Sophia Reynolds," he said, "was almost killed," Ellison said evenly, "by a property management company that faked a repair record to avoid the cost of an actual repair." The number that crystallized in Daniel's chest in that moment was not a rescue number or a fire number. It was a much simpler, colder number, 18 months. For 18 months, that wiring had been unfixed and documented as fixed. For 18 months, the residents of the Hargrove Arms had been living above a fire waiting to happen, and the people responsible for their safety had looked at the cost of fixing it and chosen instead to write down a number on a piece of paper. "Are they being charged?" Daniel asked. "The city attorney's office is looking at it," Ellison said. "It takes time." "How much time?" "More than it should." Ellison's voice carried a specific controlled frustration that suggested he had already had this conversation with people above him and found it unsatisfying. "Which is why the gap I'm describing to you isn't just theoretical, Daniel. It's not a policy problem on paper. It's a woman with a broken leg in Presbyterian Hospital and a building full of people who got lucky last night. Daniel looked at the paper in his pocket. I thought about what it meant to prevent instead of respond. He thought about 18 months. He said, "Who else knows about the falsified documentation?" As of this morning, my office, the fire investigator, and the city attorney, and now you. Ellison paused. And Sophia Reynolds. We informed her this morning. Daniel's jaw tightened. How did she take it? He asked. She asked for the name of the property management company's parent corporation, Ellison said. And then she asked for a notepad. Daniel almost smiled. Of course she did. His phone buzzed. He looked at it automatically, then stopped. The screen showed Emma's school number. His stomach dropped. He was already picking up before the second buzz finished. This is Daniel Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Mrs. Hendricks from Westside Elementary. Emma is fine, I want to say that first. She's not hurt. But we've had a situation here this afternoon that I think you need to come in and discuss. He was already standing. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. He hung up. Ellison read his face. Go, he said immediately. We can continue this another time. My daughter's school, Daniel said, already pulling his jacket on. She's okay, but, go. Ellison said again. Keep the paper. Think about it. Call me when you're ready. Daniel was halfway to the door. He stopped. He turned back. The program, he said. The prevention consulting. How soon do you need an answer? Ellison looked at him steadily. I've been waiting 14 months, he said. I can wait a little longer. Daniel nodded once. He went. The school secretary looked at him with the specific expression that school secretaries developed for parents who arrived with bandaged hands, and the general energy of someone for whom the morning had been unusually complex. She led him to Mrs. Hendricks's office without comment. Emma was sitting in a chair outside the principal's office. Not crying, not visibly distressed, sitting with her hands folded in her lap and her chin at an angle that Daniel recognized immediately as her mother's chin at her mother's most determined angle. The one that meant she had made a decision, and she had made it deliberately, and she was prepared to defend it. She looked up when he came around the corner. Dad, she said. Hey, Bug. He crouched down to her eye level, which was something he always did, something he had done since she was small enough that it was necessary, and continued to do, now that it wasn't. Mrs. Hendricks said you're okay. I'm fine, Emma said. Tyler Marsh said something and I told him he was wrong. What did Tyler Marsh say? Emma's jaw did the Sarah thing. He said you were stupid for going into the burning building and that his dad said you could have died and that you shouldn't have done it and that you were probably doing it for the attention. She delivered this with the flat, factual tone of a child reporting something that had made her angry, but which she had decided to handle with precision rather than volume. And I told him that his dad was wrong, and that you did it because that's what you do, and that some people help because helping is who they are, not because anyone is watching. Daniel looked at his daughter. He looked at her for a long moment. And then, he said, and then Tyler said I was just saying that because I was your kid, and I didn't know any better. Emma paused. And then I said that I knew my dad better than Tyler Marsh knew anything, and that Tyler Marsh should think about whether his dad would have gone into that building or just stood in the parking lot and watched. A very brief pause. And then Tyler cried, and Mrs. Hendricks said I needed to wait outside. Daniel stayed crouched at her level. I thought about what Sophia had said in the hospital room. She would have gone in too. Your wife. So you didn't just lose her. You lost the version of yourself that got to be like her. He looked at Emma. He thought, she's already her. Was Tyler okay? He asked. Emma considered this seriously. He was more embarrassed than sad, she said. He'll be fine by tomorrow. Tyler cries pretty fast, but he also stops pretty fast. Do you think you should apologize? Emma looked at him with complete unblinking honesty. I think I should apologize for making him cry, she said. I don't think I should apologize for what I said, because what I said was true. Daniel nodded slowly. I think that's right, he said. Something in Emma's posture shifted, the held together, prepared to defend tension releasing slightly. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. "No bug. Is the lady okay? The one from the building?" He looked at her. "How do you know about the lady from the building?" "Aunt Linda told me this morning. She saw the news." Emma's expression was matter of fact. "She said you were a hero. I said you were just Dad." He almost said something. He stopped himself. "The lady is okay," he said. "She broke her leg a little. She's in the hospital, but she'll be fine." Emma nodded, processing. Then, "Did it feel weird going into the building?" He looked at his daughter. I thought about how to answer that with the particular honesty that she deserved, and that he had always tried to give her, even when it was complicated. "It felt like the only thing to do," he said. Emma thought about this. "That's how I felt when Tyler said that stuff," she said. "Like it was the only thing to do." He put his hand on her shoulder. "Come on," he said. "Let's go talk to Mrs. Hendricks." Mrs. Hendricks was a compact woman in her 50s, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the look of someone who had navigated 30 years of elementary school diplomacy, and was very good at it. She looked at Daniel when he came in, and she looked at his hands, and to her considerable credit, she did not address either thing directly. "Emma was defending you," she said. "I know." It got somewhat heated. "She has opinions," Daniel said. "She comes by them honestly." Mrs. Hendricks looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Emma, who was sitting in the chair across from her desk, with the chin still at the determined angle. "Emma," she said, "would you like to tell your father what you told me after Tyler left the room?" Emma glanced at Danielle, back at Mrs. Hendricks. Then she said with the same flat precision she'd used in the hallway, "I told her that I wasn't sorry he cried, but that I was sorry I made him, and that I would tell him so. But that I wasn't going to tell him the other things I said were wrong, because they weren't." "And that's a fair position," Mrs. Hendricks said to Daniel's slight surprise. She held her ground on the substance and accepted responsibility for the method. That's pretty sophisticated thinking for a third grader." She paused. "I still can't let it pass without a conversation." But I wanted her father to hear her reasoning. "I heard it," Daniel said. He looked at his daughter. She looked back. And in that look, in the chin, and the precision, and the part where she said, "Some people help because helping is who they are, not because anyone is watching," Daniel felt something crack open in the middle of his chest that had been sealed for 5 years. He had been telling himself that he gave up rescue work for Emma. He had been telling himself that choosing her meant giving up who he had been. He had been so committed to that story that he had never stopped to ask whether Emma wanted to be the reason for it. She was 8 years old, and she was already telling him the answer. The meeting with Mrs. Hendricks ended 12 minutes later, with Emma agreeing to speak with Tyler Marsh in the morning, and Daniel signing a form confirming he'd been notified of the incident. Routine. Documented. The ordinary machinery of institutional life, processing an extraordinary moment and reducing it to paperwork. They walked to the truck together. Emma put her backpack in the back seat and climbed in the front, which she was allowed to do because she had hit the weight limit last spring and made a formal case for it at dinner, citing the safety guidelines in detail. Daniel started the truck. He didn't pull out of the parking spot yet. Emma looked at him. "You're doing the thing," she said. "What thing?" "The thing where you have something to say, and you're figuring out how to say it." She settled back in the seat. "Just say it, Dad. You always say it eventually anyway." He looked at the steering wheel. He said, "A man called me today. A fire chief. He has a job he wants me to do. Not firefighting, not running into buildings. Working to prevent fires. Teaching people what to look for before things go wrong." He paused. "I told him I needed to think about it, and that I needed to talk to you." Emma was quiet. "Because of Mom," she said. "Because of a lot of things," he said. "But yes, partly because of Mom." Emma looked out the windshield. She was quiet for long enough that he began to think she needed more time, that he should start the truck and let it rest. Then she said, "Do you miss it?" He looked at her. "Yes," he said. He said it without qualification for the first time to another person. "I miss it." Did you miss it before last night? He paused. Yes, he said. I just didn't let myself think about it. Emma turned to look at him. Dad, she said with the particular directness that 8-year-olds sometimes achieved by complete accident and sometimes achieved because they were exactly their mother's daughter. I don't need you to not be you. I just need you to come home. He looked at her. He did not trust his voice. You can do both, Emma said. Write the chief guy's job. You can do it and still come home. Yes, he said. That's yes. That's the whole point of this particular job. She nodded, like it was settled, like the conversation had arrived at its obvious conclusion, and there was nothing left to process. Okay, she said. Then you should do it. She reached down and pulled a slightly crushed granola bar from her backpack. Can we go to the library? I want another sea creature book. He stared at her. She looked back at him with the completely uncomplicated patience of someone who had said what she had to say and moved on. Yeah, he said. We can go to the library. He pulled out of the parking lot. He thought about Ellison's paper in his jacket pocket. He thought about 18 months of falsified repair records. He thought about 40 minutes of smoke building inside a wall while people slept on the other side of it. I thought about what it meant to be the person in the hallway who smelled it before anyone else did. They were 2 blocks from the school when his phone rang through the truck's speaker system. He glanced at the screen on the dashboard. Sophia. Emma looked at the name, looked at her father, said nothing with perfect and obvious restraint. He answered it. I just got off the phone with my lawyer, Sophia said without preamble. The focus in her voice was different from the hospital room. Faster, sharper, the voice of someone who had been sitting with information and had decided what to do with it. The property management company, he said. You know. Ellison told me this afternoon. 18 months, she said. 18 months ago, they received a notice of required repair, and they documented completion of a repair that never happened. I was living in that building for 11 of those months, Daniel. I moved in last March. Her voice was controlled, but something underneath it was not. 3 other buildings in Denver are managed by the same parent corporation. I've already requested their inspection records. He glanced at Emma, who was looking very carefully out the passenger window with the concentrated attention of a child who was very much listening. What are you doing? He said. I'm an architect, Sophia said. I design buildings to be safe. Someone built a paper record to make an unsafe building look safe and put 40 people in it, and they made their decision based on the cost of doing it right. A pause. I am not going to let that be a story that ends with a fire investigator's preliminary report and a city attorney who moves slowly. Sophia. I know how you feel about the reporters. That's not... The families in that building deserve to know what happened, she said. The families in the other 3 buildings deserve to know what they're living in. That's not a media story. That's a public safety story. A pause. I need someone who understands fire behavior and structural safety to look at what I'm finding. Someone who can tell me whether what I'm reading in these inspection records represents a real danger or a paperwork problem. He drove. He thought. Emma was still looking very carefully out the window. I'm not a fire investigator, he said. I know what you are, Sophia said. And I know what you know, and I'm asking. A beat, then quieter, please. He thought about the program outline in his pocket. He thought about prevention versus response. He thought about Emma in the passenger seat saying, I don't need you to not be you. Send me the inspection records, he said. A pause. Thank you, Sophia said. Don't thank me yet. I haven't looked at them. You will, she said. And there was something in her voice, not confidence exactly, but certainty. The certainty of someone who had read a structure and found it sound. She hung up. The truck was quiet. Emma turned from the window. The lady from the building, she said. Yes. Emma nodded once, turned back to the window. She sounds smart, she said. He looked at his daughter. I thought about the inspection records that were about to appear in his email. He thought about 3 other in Denver, managed by the same corporation, with the same parent company, with the same history of looking at the cost of doing things right and choosing to write a number on a piece of paper instead. He thought about what it meant to be the person who could read those records and know the difference between a paperwork problem and a fire waiting to happen. He thought about 40 minutes. He pulled into the library parking lot. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She really is." They went inside. Emma found her sea creature book in 4 minutes because she had already identified its call number at home and written it on the back of her hand in blue marker. Daniel sat in a library chair with his bandaged hands and his jacket pocket and the particular weight of a man who had spent 5 years very carefully becoming smaller than he was and felt the edges of something larger pressing back in. His email buzzed. The inspection records from Sophia. He opened the first file. He started reading, and 3 pages in he stopped. He sat very still in the library chair. Because what he was looking at was not a paperwork problem. What he was looking at was 3 buildings in Denver. 3 buildings with the same falsified electrical inspection record. 3 buildings where the same repair had been documented as completed and had not been completed. 3 buildings where right now tonight, families were going to sleep on the other side of walls that had the same wiring as the wall at the Hargrove Arms. The same wiring that had been building heat for 40 minutes before anyone smelled anything. He looked up. Emma was at the circulation desk talking to the librarian about octopi with the focused enthusiasm of someone who had found her topic. He looked back at the records. He thought 40 minutes. He pulled the paper from his pocket. Chief Ellison's number was at the bottom. He dialed. It rang twice. "Carter," Ellison said. "I'm looking at something," Daniel said. His voice was steady and flat, and carried in it the particular quality of someone who had moved past feeling and arrived at function. "I need you to tell me the other buildings managed by the Hargrove Arms parent corporation. Has anyone looked at them?" A silence on the line. Then Ellison carefully, "The city attorney's office requested records this afternoon. We're still waiting." "Don't wait," Daniel said. Another silence. "What are you looking at?" Ellison said. "I'm looking at inspection documents that Sophia Reynolds pulled from public records. The same repair that was falsified at Hargrove Arms, the electrical wiring in the East Infrastructure Chase, is listed as completed at 3 other properties. Same documentation signature, same contractor name, same completion date." A beat. "Same contractor," Ellison said. "Same contractor, same date. 3 different buildings, all within the last 20 months. The silence on the line was different now. It had urgency in it. "Send me everything you have," Ellison said. "Right now, tonight. I'm sending it. And Daniel." Ellison paused. "The program, the consulting position." His voice was very level. "If you were considering it, I need you to know that what you just found is exactly why I need someone like you in that role." Daniel looked at the inspection records on his phone screen. He looked at Emma at the circulation desk, now apparently deep in a negotiation about the maximum number of books a person could check out in one visit. He thought about 3 buildings. He thought about 40 minutes. He thought about a woman saying, "I can't move from the other side of a locked door." "Send me the contracts," Daniel said. "I'll have them back to you by morning." The contracts arrived at 11:47 that night. Daniel was still at the kitchen table when they came through the same table where he'd sat 2 nights ago with cold coffee and burned hands, and the particular weight of a man trying to make sense of something that didn't want to be made sense of neatly. Emma was asleep. The house was quiet. He had his laptop open, the inspection records Sophia sent him arranged across 3 browser tabs and a yellow legal pad beside the keyboard, where he'd been making notes for the last 2 hours, in the careful, systematic handwriting of someone who had learned that the difference between a finding and a conclusion was the quality of the notes between them. He opened the contracts. He read them. Then he read them again. The consulting position was real, and it was substantial. Not a token role, not a ceremonial gesture dressed up in official language. Ellison had built something with teeth, direct access to the Fire Prevention Division's Inspection Database Authority to flag properties for immediate review, a seat at the table when building permits. Involving structural modifications came through city planning. The hours were flexible. The compensation was fair. The work was exactly what he had described at the coffee shop, catching the things that fell through the gaps before those gaps became fires. Daniel sat with it for a long time. He thought about the Hargrove Arms, about the 40 minutes, about the electrical chase behind the east wall that had been burning quietly, patiently, like something that had learned to wait. He thought about the 3 other buildings. He signed the contracts at 12:19 in the morning and sent them back. Then he sat in the quiet kitchen for another 20 minutes, not doing anything in particular, just sitting with what he'd done and letting it settle. It didn't feel dramatic. That was the thing he hadn't expected. He had spent 5 years treating the idea of going back to this work as something enormous, something that would require a seismic internal event to approach. Something that would feel like a betrayal, or a surrender, or a departure from everything he'd built in the years since Sarah died. It felt like none of those things. It felt like a door he'd been standing outside for 5 years, and he had finally stopped pretending he wasn't standing there. He closed the laptop. He went to bed. He slept better than he had in recent memory. 3 days after the fire, Sophia Reynolds was discharged from Presbyterian Hospital with a walking boot, a pair of crutches she immediately found irritating, and a folder of insurance claim documents that she described to Daniel when he picked her up as criminally inadequate, given the circumstances. He had offered to drive her when she called that morning. He had not examined too carefully why he offered. She had accepted without making anything of it, which he appreciated. She came out through the hospital's main entrance with the crutches under her arms and the folder tucked against her side, and the expression of someone who had spent 3 days in a hospital room organizing a counterattack and was ready to execute it. She was wearing her own clothes, her sister had brought them, and the walking boot made her gait uneven, but she moved through the lobby like someone who had decided the boot was a minor operational detail. He got out of the truck, and she shook her head immediately. "I can get in a truck," she said. "I know you can." "Then why are you?" "Because the step up is about 14 inches, and your right hand is occupied with the crutch, and your left leg has a fracture in it," he said. "I'm not helping you because you can't do it. I'm helping you because it's faster." She looked at him. "That's a very specific distinction," she said. "I work with people who have injuries," he said. "I learn to make specific distinctions." She handed him the folder without comment and climbed in with his hand at her elbow for exactly the 4 seconds it took to manage the step. Then she settled into the seat and took the folder back and looked straight ahead. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "My sister's." She gave him the address, a neighborhood in Capitol Hill, 20 minutes from the hospital. "She has a spare room, and she's already reorganized it, and she's going to treat me like I'm made of glass for approximately 3 weeks, and I'm preparing myself for that." "Is she good at it? Taking care of people?" "She's too good at it. She'll bring me things before I ask for them, and that will drive me insane." Sophia paused. "But she's my sister, so I'll manage." He drove. After a minute, she said, "Ellison told me you signed the contracts." "He told you that already?" "He called this morning to check on me." She glanced at him. "He's thorough." "He is," Daniel said. "He said you sent them back at 12:19 in the morning." "I don't sleep much." "I know." She looked at the folder in her lap. "I'm glad you signed them." He glanced at her. "Because of the 3 buildings," he said. "Because of every building that comes after the 3 buildings," she said. "Because of the whole system of gaps that someone has to know enough to close." She paused. "But yes, also because of the 3 buildings." He drove. 2 blocks from the hospital, she said without particular setup. The property management company's parent corporation is called Meridian Residential Holdings. They manage 47 properties across Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico. She opened the folder. "I've been doing some reading. In the hospital. Jordan brought me printed records because the hospital Wi-Fi was unreliable, and I needed to be able to annotate." She pulled out a page. 14 of the 47 properties are more than 30 years old. Of those 14, 9 have had electrical inspection notices in the last 3 years. Of those 9, 7 have documented completion reports signed by the same contractor. The same one as Hargrove Arms. Summit Line Electrical, based out of Aurora. She paused. "I called their business line this morning. The number has been disconnected." Daniel's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. When was it disconnected? He said. The disconnection notice I found in a vendor database is dated 4 days ago. She looked at him. 2 days after the fire. He was quiet for a moment. They knew it was coming, he said. Someone knew, she said. Whether that's Summit Line trying to disappear or Meridian Residential making calls, I don't know yet. She closed the folder. But the timing is not coincidental. He pulled up to a light and stopped. He thought about falsified records and disconnected phone numbers and the particular mechanics of how people who did things wrong prepared for the consequences. He thought about 7 buildings. 7 buildings with the same paper completion sitting on top of the same potentially compromised wiring. Have you given this to Ellison? He said. I sent it to him an hour ago, Sophia said. And to the city attorney's office. And to my own attorney. A beat. And to a journalist at the Denver Post who has been covering building code enforcement for 6 years and who I trust to handle it responsibly. He looked at her. I thought you said the Denver Post was calling you. A different reporter called me. Jennifer Hawks, she covers breaking news. The person I called is named Marcus Webb, and he covers the systems. She met his look evenly. There's a difference between a story about a dramatic fire and a story about a corporation that has been falsifying safety records across 3 states for an unknown period of time. One of those stories disappears in a week. The other one changes building codes. He held her gaze for a moment. Then the light changed. He drove. You had all of this planned, he said. I had the framework, she said. The hospital gave me 3 days to fill it in. She paused. I design buildings, Daniel. I know how to build a case. You make sure the load-bearing elements are solid, and then you build up from there. He thought about that. What's the load-bearing element? He said. The 7 buildings, she said. If we can document that 7 properties owned by Meridian Residential Holdings have the same falsified electrical inspection records, that's not a negligent management company. That's a pattern. And a pattern is a policy. She paused. A policy is intent. He drove. He thought about what she had just said. Intent. The difference between a company that cut corners carelessly and a company that had a systematic process for falsifying safety records was not a legal technicality. It was the difference between a fine and a criminal charge. It was the difference between paying a settlement and going to prison. How long have you been thinking about this? He said. Since about 6 hours after the fire, she said. Once I understood that the wiring had been flagged and documented as fixed. She was quiet for a beat. I was very angry for the first 2 hours. And then I was done being angry because being angry wasn't useful, so I started working. He looked at her from the corner of his eye. She was looking at the folder again. Methodical, focused, processing. He thought, she does it the same way I do. Feel it close at function. I thought Sarah did it that way too. He didn't examine that thought any further. He pulled onto her sister's street. He stopped in front of the house, a well-kept brick place with a porch light on, despite the afternoon hour, which told him something about the sister already. Sophia started gathering herself. He was already out and around to her side before she'd fully assessed the step situation, and this time she didn't argue about it. She took his hand at the elbow, managed the steps, settled onto the crutches. She stood on the sidewalk. She looked at the house. Something moved across her expression. Something quick and complicated that she contained before it could fully surface, but he caught it. You designed buildings, he said quietly. And now you have to stay somewhere that isn't yours. She was quiet for a moment. It's temporary, she said. I know it's temporary. She adjusted her grip on the crutches. It's just, I know what it cost to make a space that felt like mine. And now... She stopped. He waited. Now I'm going to have to start over, she said. And I know how to do that. I've done it before. She looked at him. It's just, it matters starting over. It's not nothing. No, he said. It's not nothing. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, how did you do it after your wife, starting over? He thought about it. One thing at a time, he said. and not pretending it was something other than what it was. She nodded slowly. "One thing at a time," she repeated. The front door of the house opened, and a woman appeared on the porch, shorter than Sophia, quicker looking, with the particular energy of someone who had been watching the street for 15 minutes and had finally achieved patience. "That's Rachel," Sophia said, not quite under her breath. "She was watching for you," Daniel said. "She's been watching for me since I called from the hospital at 6 in the morning." Sophia started toward the house, then stopped and turned. "Are you coming in?" He blinked. "I wasn't planning to." "Rachel's going to ask me 100 questions, and I could use some backup," she said. "Also, she's a better cook than she admits, and she will absolutely be making something." A pause. "Come in." He looked at the house. He thought about his cleared afternoon, about Emma at Linda's until 5:30, about the empty house and the legal pad and the work he'd been planning to do on the inspection records. He thought about how long it had been since he'd sat at someone else's kitchen table because someone had asked him to, and he'd said yes without a practical reason. "Okay," he said. Rachel met them at the porch steps with the compressed energy of someone who was managing both relief and anxiety simultaneously, and doing it through hospitality. She took the crutch situation in at a glance, adjusted her approach, and guided Sophia up the steps with the practiced efficiency of someone who had clearly been thinking about this exact moment. She looked at Daniel. "Rachel," Sophia said, "this is Daniel Carter. He got me out of the building." Rachel looked at him. Then she did something he hadn't expected. She didn't say thank you. She didn't get emotional. She looked at him with clear, steady eyes and said, "Are you hungry?" He almost laughed. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. "Come in." Rachel's kitchen smelled like something that had been cooking low and slow all day, the particular smell of someone who had been managing anxiety through the production of food. She had made a pot roast. She had made it, Daniel suspected, at approximately 7 in the morning when she got Sophia's call and needed something to do with her hands. Sophia settled at the kitchen table with the practiced efficiency of someone learning their temporary environment, and Daniel sat across from her, and Rachel moved between the stove and the counter with the focused energy of the newly relieved talking as she worked. "The insurance company called 3 times, Rachel said. "I told them to call Sophia's lawyer. They didn't like that." "They rarely do," Sophia said. "The building management company also called." Rachel's voice changed on this compressed like pressure behind a valve. "Someone named Howard. He wanted to express their regret." She set a plate in front of Sophia. "I told Howard that regret was not a structural repair." Sophia looked at her sister. "What did Howard say to that?" she said. "He said he would call back." "Has he?" "No." Rachel set a plate in front of Daniel. "Smart man." Daniel looked at the food. Real food, the kind that had time in it. "Thank you," he said. Rachel looked at him with the same clear directness as her sister. "You carried her out of a burning building on a broken leg," she said. "The least I can do is feed you." "She walked most of it," he said. "She walked on a broken leg," Rachel said, "because you told her she could." She sat down with her own plate. "Don't minimize what you did. I've thought about it for 3 days. I didn't have an answer for that." They ate. For a while the kitchen was the good kind of quiet, the kind that had warmth in it and didn't need to be filled. Then Rachel said to Sophia, "The journalist called, Marcus Webb." Sophia looked up. "What did he say?" "He said he has 3 sources at the city attorney's office confirming the investigation is being expanded. He said the story is going to run Thursday." Rachel paused. "He also said the name Summit Line Electrical came up in a 2021 complaint filed with the State Contractor Licensing Board. The complaint was dismissed." Sophia's fork stopped. "Dismissed on what grounds?" she said. "He didn't know yet. He's looking into it." Daniel set his fork down. "He said a complaint dismissed in 2021, and the same contractor is showing up on falsified records through 2024. Both women looked at him. "Someone let it go," he said. "In 2021. Either the board didn't investigate properly, or someone made a decision to close the file and it shouldn't have been closed." Sophia was very still. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" she said. "I'm saying a contractor who should have lost their license in 2021 was still signing off on work that wasn't being done through at least late 2024, he said. "And I'm saying the gap between those two things is worth looking at." Rachel looked between them. "So it's not just Meridian Residential," she said slowly. "I don't know yet," Daniel said. "But the pattern Sophia found the same signature, the same dates across multiple properties. That's not a small operation. That's organized. And organized operations usually have more than one layer." Sophia picked up her phone. "I'm calling Marcus Webb," she said. "It's 7 o'clock, Rachel said. "He's a journalist," Sophia said. "He's working." She was right. Webb picked up on the second ring, and Sophia laid out what Daniel had said with the same clear structural precision she brought to everything. No drama, no editorializing, just the load-bearing elements in order. Daniel listened. He heard the pause on Webb's end when Sophia finished. Then Webb said something Daniel couldn't quite catch, and Sophia said, "Then we need to find out who closed the 2021 complaint and why." Another pause. "Yes, tonight if you can." She hung up. She looked at Daniel. "He already had the same question," she said. "He just didn't have the framing. And now he does. And now he does." She looked at her plate, picked her fork back up. "One thing at a time," she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone. Rachel looked between them with the expression of someone who was witnessing something that she didn't fully understand yet, but recognized as significant. "More pot roast," she said. Daniel looked at his plate. "Yes," he said. "Please." It was 8:47 when he left Rachel's house, stepping out into the February night, with the particular clarity that came from having eaten a real meal and sat in a real kitchen with real people doing real things. He sat in his truck for a moment before starting it. His phone buzzed. Marcus, his employee, Rodriguez, wants to know if he still has a job after the van thing. Daniel typed back, "Tell him yes. Tell him to buy a spare key." Marcus already did. He says thanks. "Also, you doing okay?" "Really?" He looked at the house. Light in the kitchen window. Sophia and Rachel still at the table, probably the folder open again. He typed, "Getting there. Thanks for covering." He started the truck. He was 3 blocks away when his phone rang through the speakers. The screen said, "Chief Ellison." He answered, "Carter." Ellison's voice had an edge Daniel hadn't heard before. Controlled but sharp, the voice of someone who had received information and was still processing what it meant. "The city attorney's office moved faster than I expected. They pulled the Summit Line electrical licensing file tonight." "And," Daniel said, "the 2021 complaint was filed by a property inspector named Gerald Thorne. Thorne flagged Summit Line for signing off on electrical work at a residential property that subsequent inspection showed was not completed. Standard complaint. Should have gone to a full review." "But it didn't," Daniel said. "It was reviewed by a licensing board member named Carl Whitfield," Ellison said. "Whitfield closed it as insufficient evidence. Whitfield retired from the board 8 months later." A pause. "Carl Whitfield is currently listed as a senior operations consultant for Meridian Residential Holdings." The truck felt very quiet. Daniel drove. He said, "How long has he been with Meridian?" "His LinkedIn profile says he joined 6 months after he left the licensing board," Ellison said. "The city attorney is pulling his consultant contract tonight." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I thought about a man who sat on a licensing board with the authority to close complaints. He thought about a corporation that had been falsifying electrical inspection records across 3 states. He thought about the specific value of having someone on the inside of the regulatory process who could make inconvenient complaints disappear. He thought about 40 minutes. He thought about Sophia on her hallway floor." "Ellison," he said. "I know," the chief said. His voice was flat and heavy and tired in the way of someone who had given their life to building safety systems and was looking at the evidence that someone had been carefully dismantling those systems from the inside. "I know." "The 7 buildings," Daniel said. "We're doing emergency inspections tonight," Ellison said. I have 2 teams in the field right now. If those properties have the same compromised wiring, and I believe they do, we'll be issuing emergency evacuation notices before midnight." Daniel pulled over. He stopped the truck. "You're evacuating buildings tonight," he said. "I have no choice," Ellison said. "If the wiring is what the records suggest, I can't leave people in those buildings." He paused. "It's February. It's 18 degrees. I'm working on temporary shelter arrangements right now." Daniel thought about families, about children in their beds, about the particular terror of being told to leave your home at midnight in the middle of winter. He thought about the fact that it was better than the alternative. "I can help," he said. "You're not yet officially on the city's books," Ellison said. "Your contracts won't process until Monday." "I'm not talking about officially," Daniel said. "I'm talking about a man with 15 years of structural emergency experience who knows how to communicate with frightened people in the middle of the night." He paused. "Tell me which building." A silence on the line. Then Ellison said, "Riverside Manor on Alameda. My team is there now, but the building manager is refusing to cooperate with the evacuation order. He says he wants to see documentation, and he's calling his company's legal department." "Of course he is," Daniel said. He was already pulling away from the curb. "I'll be there in 12 minutes, he said. "Carter, I'm not going into any building," he said. "I'm going to stand in a parking lot and help people understand what's happening. That's not a liability issue. That's a person being helpful." A pause. 12 minutes, Ellison said. He made it in 10. Riverside Manor was a 4-story apartment building from the mid-90s, the kind that had once been considered upscale and had aged into solidly middle class in the way that buildings did when neighborhoods changed around them and the maintenance budget didn't quite keep up. There were 2 fire department vehicles in the parking lot and a city vehicle and a group of residents in various states of winter underprepared standing near the building entrance. The building manager, a large man in his 50s named Gerald, according to the nameplate visible on his jacket, was standing in the lobby doorway with his arms crossed, and the particular expression of a person who had decided that legal exposure was a more immediate concern than human safety. Daniel walked up to him. Gerald looked at him. "Who are you?" Gerald said. "My name is Daniel Carter," he said. "I'm a safety consultant working with the city. I need you to listen to me for 30 seconds. I need to see documentation." "The documentation is being processed tonight," Daniel said. His voice was completely level. Not aggressive, not pleading, not performing authority. Just level. "What I need you to understand in the next 30 seconds is that the wiring and the electrical infrastructure of this building has a documented history of falsified repair records. The same wiring that started the Hargrove Arms fire 4 days ago. You have families in this building right now who are sleeping on the other side of walls that may have been building heat for hours." Gerald's jaw tightened. "I can't authorize an evacuation without—" "Gerald." Daniel stepped slightly closer. Not threateningly, just removing the distance. "I don't need you to authorize anything. The fire chief has that authority, and he's exercising it. What I need is for you to decide right now whether you're someone who makes this harder or someone who helps." He held Gerald's gaze. "Because in about 6 hours, when the city attorney's office finishes what they started tonight, everyone who made this harder is going to have a very specific kind of attention on them. And everyone who helped is going to have a slightly different kind." Gerald stared at him. 10 seconds. 15. Then he stepped out of the doorway. "I'll help with the 3rd floor," he said, not quite looking at Daniel. "I know most of those residents." "Good," Daniel said. "Start now." He turned to this fire team standing nearby. A young lieutenant named Vasquez, maybe 30, who had the contained energy of someone who had been managing the Gerald situation for 20 minutes and was relieved to see it resolve. "3rd floor is covered," Daniel said. "1st and 2nd. "My team has 2nd, Vasquez said. "I haven't had anyone for 1st. "I've got 1st, Daniel said. He went into the building. He knocked on 12 doors. He said the same thing at each one, calibrated slightly for what he could read of the person on the other side. The family with small children who needed calm reassurance. The elderly couple who needed logistical clarity. The young man alone who needed it. explained fast and practically. The woman who came to the door, already frightened because she'd seen the trucks and needed someone to tell her she had time, she was safe. She just needed to put her shoes on and come outside. 12 doors. 47 minutes. When the last first-floor resident was in the parking lot, Daniel walked out into the February cold and stood with his breath showing in the air and looked up at the building. Vasquez appeared beside him. "That's everyone," Vasquez said. "Good." They stood there for a moment. "You're Carter," Vasquez said. "The Hargrove Arms guy." "I was there, yeah." "The chief talks about you," Vasquez said. "I mean in context, tonight. He mentioned you were coming." He looked at Daniel. "You did 16 years." "I did." "And then you left." "And then I came back," Daniel said. Vasquez nodded slowly. "That's a long break," he said. "It was the right length," Daniel said. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. "Sophia Ellison just called me. You're at Riverside Manor." He typed back, "Everyone's out. Building's clear." A pause. Then, the 2021 complaint. Gerald Thorne, the inspector who filed it. Webb found him. He's been trying to get someone to listen for 3 years. Daniel stared at the screen. 3 years, he thought. A man who knew something was wrong, who filed a complaint and watched it disappear and kept trying to get someone to hear him. He typed, "Is he willing to talk to the city attorney?" The response came back in under 30 seconds. "He's already on his way." Daniel put his phone in his pocket. He stood in the parking lot of Riverside Manor with 47 evacuated residents behind him and a February night in front of him and the first genuine forward motion he'd felt in 5 years. His phone buzzed again. "Emma, Dad, are you okay? Aunt Linda said you were working late. Did something happen?" He smiled at the screen. He typed, "Everything's okay, Bug. Working on something important. I'll tell you about it tomorrow." A pause. Then, "Okay. I saved you some of Linda's lasagna. Don't forget to eat." He stood in the cold February parking lot of a building he'd just helped evacuate, and he laughed. A real laugh. Short and quiet and real. Don't forget to eat. 8 years old. Her mother's daughter. He put the phone away. He thought about Gerald Thorne driving to meet the city attorney right now, 3 years of frustration, finally finding a door that was open. He thought about Sophia at Rachel's kitchen table, with the folder and the precision and the one thing at a time. He thought about Chief Ellison's 2 teams in the field, working through the night, checking wiring that should have been checked 18 months ago by a contractor who had learned that disappearing was easier than being accountable. He thought about the version of himself who had signed contracts at 12:19 in the morning and felt not dramatic but simply right. I thought about what Emma had said in the truck. "I don't need you to not be you. I just need you to come home." He was going to come home. He was going to come home, and he was going to be himself. The whole of himself. The version that had trained for 7 years to know what burning wiring smelled like through a wall, and the version that packed lunches and fixed backpack straps and crouched down to eye level without being asked to. Both things. At the same time. Because it turned out they were not separate things. They never had been. He walked back toward his truck. Behind him, the residents of Riverside Manor were being directed to a temporary shelter the city had arranged a community center 4 blocks away, warm and lit with Red Cross volunteers already setting up cots. He drove past it on the way out. He saw through the windows a room filling with light and people, and the specific complicated resilience of ordinary families managing an extraordinary night. He thought, this is the work. Right here. This is what it looks like. He drove home. He ate the cold lasagna Emma had saved him standing at the kitchen counter. He sat at the table. He opened his laptop. He started writing the inspection notes for Riverside Manor because the notes mattered, because the documentation was part of the case, because every detail written down carefully was another piece of the structure they were building. Not a building of concrete and steel, but a case, an argument, a body of evidence that would outlast one fire and one night and one man's decision to stop standing outside a door. He wrote until 2 in the morning. Then he went to bed. He set his alarm for 5:30. He had work to do. The alarm went off at 5:30, and Daniel was already awake. He had been awake since 4:40, lying in the dark with his eyes open and his mind running the same quiet calculation it had been running since he sent those contracts back at 12:19 in the morning. Not anxious. Not second-guessing. Just processing. The way a building settled after something significant changed in its structure. A gradual redistribution of weight finding its new equilibrium. He got up, made coffee, looked at his notes from the night before. At 6:15 his phone rang. Ellison. He picked up before the second ring. Both remaining buildings, Ellison said without preamble. Inspection teams finished at 4 this morning. The wiring and the electrical infrastructure matches what we found at Hargrove Arms. Same contractor signature. Same pattern of falsified documentation. A pause, and in the pause, Daniel heard the particular weight of a man delivering a number he'd been dreading. We found active heat signatures in one of them. The thermal imaging showed a section of wiring in the east wall of the third floor that was already an early-stage thermal runaway. Daniel set his coffee down. "How far along?" he said. "The investigator's estimate is that without the inspection last night, that building would have had an ignition event within 72 hours, possibly sooner." Ellison's voice was controlled and flat. "There are 93 residents in that building, Daniel. Families, children." He stood at his kitchen counter and let that number settle, 93. He thought about 40 minutes. About what 40 minutes had almost cost one woman on the third floor of the Hargrove Arms. Then he multiplied that by 93 and felt something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite either of those things because it was all of them at once. "The city attorney," he said. "Filed this morning at 7, Ellison said. "Criminal charges against Meridian Residential Holdings, their parent corporation, and 3 named executives. Fraud, falsification of public safety records, criminal negligence." A pause. "Carl Whitfield was picked up at his home in Littleton at 6:45 this morning." The name landed with the specific weight of a thing finally being called what it was. "And Summit Line," Daniel said. "The contractor's principal man named Roy Delaney turned himself in at the district attorney's office at 6 this morning with an attorney. His attorney is saying he'll cooperate fully in exchange for consideration." Ellison paused. "Which means he has something to say, and he's decided saying it is better than not." "How many people knew?" Daniel said. "That's what the DA is going to find out," Ellison said. "My guess is it's not a small number. These arrangements don't stay invisible across 47 properties and 3 states without multiple people choosing to look the other way." A beat. Gerald Thorne, the inspector who filed the original 2021 complaint, he met with the city attorney last night for 3 hours. He had documentation. He'd been keeping copies. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "He kept copies for 3 years, he said. He said he knew someday someone would listen," Ellison said. "He just didn't know when." Daniel thought about a man sitting on that for 3 years. Filing a complaint, watching it disappear, keeping his copies waiting for a door to open. He thought about what that kind of patience cost. What kind of faith it required to keep holding on to something when every system you brought it to told you to let it go. "He did the right thing," Daniel said. "He did," Ellison said. "And now it matters." A pause. "The story runs in the Denver Post this morning. Webb's piece, full investigation. He had it ready last night and held it until the charges were filed." Another pause. "I wanted you to hear all of this from me before you saw it anywhere else." Daniel stood in his kitchen. He thought about one night, one smell in a hallway, one door he kicked in because a woman said she couldn't move. He thought about how far that night had traveled in 5 days. "Thank you," he said, "for calling." "Thank you for answering," Ellison said, and he said it with the specific sincerity of a man who meant more than the words. "The consulting contracts processed early, by the way. Officially on the books as of 6 this morning. Welcome back, Carter." He hung up. Daniel stood in his kitchen. He picked up his coffee. He drank it. He thought welcome back. He sat with that for a minute. Then he went to wake up his daughter. Emma was already half awake when he came to her door, She had her mother's instinct for knowing when someone was nearby, the light sleeping awareness that had always felt to Daniel like a small inherited gift. She pushed herself up in bed and looked at him with the specific early morning look of a child whose brain was already running ahead of her eyes. "Something happened," she said. "Good things," he said. He sat on the edge of her bed. "Can I tell you?" She pulled her knees to her chest and nodded. He told her. Not all of it, not the adult details, not the legal specifics, but the shape of it. The inspection records. The 3 buildings. The 93 people who were safe this morning because someone had gone into a parking lot and checked the wiring. The man who had kept copies for 3 years. The charges filed at 7 in the morning. Emma listened with the focused, unblinking attention she brought to things that mattered to her. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "So you stopping it before it happened. That's the whole point of the new job." "That's the whole point," he said. She nodded slowly. "That's better," she said. He looked at her. "Better than what?" he said. "Better than running into buildings after they're already on fire." She said it practically without drama. "I mean, I know you had to do that, the other night. And I'm glad you did. But if you can stop the fire from happening in the first place." She paused. "That's just better math, Dad." He stared at his daughter, his 8-year-old daughter, sitting in her bed in the early morning light, telling him with complete matter-of-fact clarity the thing that had taken him 5 days and multiple crises, and a chief of fire, and a woman with a broken leg to work his way around to. Better math. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly right." She seemed satisfied with this. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. "Can I have waffles?" she said. He laughed. "Yeah," he said. "You can have waffles." They had breakfast together at the kitchen table, which they did most mornings, but which felt different this morning in a way that was hard to name precisely. Not more significant. Their ordinary breakfasts were already significant. Already the thing he had built the last 5 years around. Just wider. Like a room that had gained a window. Emma ate her waffle and told him about the sea creature book and a specific species of octopus that could change not just its color, but its texture, and her theory that this was underappreciated as an engineering concept. He listened. He thought, she's going to build something, this kid. Something real. He dropped her at school at 7:58. She hopped out of the truck with her backpack and her library book, and then turned back, one hand on the door. "Dad," she said. "Yeah." She looked at him with the clear, unhurried look that she sometimes got. The look that was entirely her own, not Sarah's, not his, something she had developed in 8 years of being exactly herself. "I'm proud of you," she said. Then she closed the door and walked into school. He sat in the drop-off lane for a moment after she disappeared through the doors. He was aware that his jaw was tight in the way it got when he was holding something that wanted to surface. He drove. I was halfway to the office when his phone rang through the speakers. "Sophia," he answered. "You saw the post," she said. "Not yet. Ellison called me at 6:15. "Webb's piece is good," she said. "It's really good. He named everyone. He laid out the whole chain from Whitfield to Summit Line to Meridian Residential. He has the 3-state pattern. He has the thermal imaging finding from last night." A pause. He also mentioned Gerald Thorne, by name, with a photo. Gerald Thorne has been trying to get someone to listen since 2021, and this morning his name is in the Denver Post with the full story. Daniel thought about that. I thought about what it meant to be a person who knew something important and had nowhere to put it. And then suddenly, having somewhere. "How are you doing?" he said. A pause on the line. With Sophia, pauses were informative. She was not a person who paused from uncertainty. When she paused, she was making a decision about honesty. "I had a hard night," she said. "After you left. Rachel went to bed and I was just sitting with it, all of it." Another pause. "The 5 years of files. The project I was in the middle of. My drafting setup that took me 18 months to get exactly right." She said this quietly, without self-pity, in the way she said everything clearly, factually, without flinching from what was true. "I know those are things. I know they're replaceable in the technical sense. But they were mine. And it's okay to grieve things, right? even when you know they're just things. Yes, he said. It's okay to grieve things. Rachel says the same. A breath. I'll be all right. I'm already thinking about the new space, what I want it to be. I've been making notes. A pause, and something shifted in her voice, a small, genuine warmth that she didn't always let reach the surface. I keep thinking about what you said, one thing at a time, and not pretending it's something other than what it is. It works, he said. Eventually. Eventually, she agreed. A beat of quiet on the line. Then she said, "The city attorney's office called this morning. They want me to be a witness. Expert testimony on building code compliance and what the falsified records mean in structural safety terms." "You're going to do it," he said. Not a question. "Of course," she said. "That's not even a decision." A pause. "They also mentioned your name. They may want you too, for the fire behavior and structural emergency protocol side." He thought about that. "If they need me," he said, "I'll be there." "I told them that," she said. He glanced at the phone mount on his dashboard. "You told them that before you asked me," he said. "I told them that because I know you," she said. And she said it simply without any particular weight as a statement of fact. "I've known you for 5 days and I know you." He drove. He thought about that. "Sophia," he said. "Yes." I wasn't sure what he was going to say next. He thought about Emma's waffles and the window the morning had gained, and the contracts that processed at 6, and Ellison saying welcome back, and the 93 people who were safe this morning. He thought about the specific way a person looked at you when you found them on a hallway floor, and they had decided to trust that you were going to get them out. "How's the leg today?" he said. A pause. Then she laughed. A real laugh shorter than most people's, genuine in the way real things were. "It's a leg with a fracture in it," she said. "It's doing what fractured legs do. It's reminding me it exists at regular intervals." "Are you using the crutches?" "I'm using one crutch," she said. "I find the second one to be unnecessary." "That's not what the doctor said." "The doctor said what doctors say. I'm an architect. I understand load distribution." A pause. "Don't lecture me about my own fibula, Daniel." He smiled. "Okay," he said. "Are you smiling?" "No," he said. "You're smiling," she said. "I can hear it." A pause. "Come by for coffee if you have time today. Rachel is going to make something elaborate for lunch, and there will be too much of it." I thought about his schedule. The morning was his first official day in any capacity as a city consulting contractor. Ellison had sent a calendar invite for a 10 o'clock briefing with the Fire Prevention Division. "After 11, he said. "After 11, she confirmed. He hung up. He drove. The 10 o'clock briefing with the Fire Prevention Division was in a conference room on the 4th floor of the Denver Fire Department's administrative building. A room that smelled like coffee and photocopier toner, and the specific institutional atmosphere of a place where serious work happened without ceremony. There were 7 people at the table when Daniel walked in, including Ellison at the head, 2 fire marshals, a city building code official, a representative from the city attorney's office, and 2 members of Ellison's inspection team. Vasquez, the lieutenant from Riverside Manor the night before, was one of them. Vasquez looked up when Daniel came in and gave him the brief economical nod of someone who had worked a hard night alongside someone and felt no need to elaborate on it. Ellison stood when Daniel entered. He didn't make a speech about it. He just stood and the others at the table registered it, and Daniel sat down. "Let's get to work," Ellison said. They worked. For the next 2 hours, Daniel sat in that room and did the thing he had been trained to do at the highest level and had been not doing for 5 years. He read inspection records. He flagged discrepancies. He walked the team through what the thermal imaging findings meant in terms of fire propagation timelines. He explained in the precise technical language of his former profession exactly why the falsified repairs at the Hargrove Arms had created the specific conditions that led to the fire, and exactly what the identical falsifications at the other properties would have produced if the inspections had come 72 hours later. I explained it clearly. He explained it without drama. He explained it the way he had once explained it to rooms full of firefighters in training, with the understanding that clarity was respect, that the people in the room deserved to understand exactly what they were dealing with. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then the city building code official, a woman named Patricia Huang, who had been taking notes continuously and whose expression throughout had been the focused attention of someone absorbing information they needed, looked up and said, "How long have you been out of active practice?" 5 years, Daniel said. She looked at him steadily. "It doesn't show," she said. He nodded. After the briefing, Ellison walked him to the elevator. "Patricia Huang has been trying to modernize the pre-inspection flagging system for 2 years," Ellison said. "She's going to want to talk to you about the technical specifications." "She can call me," Daniel said. "She'll do more than call you." Ellison pressed the elevator button. When Patricia Huang decides she wants something, she builds the case for it until it exists. He paused. "You're going to be busy, Carter." "I know," Daniel said. The elevator opened. He got in. He thought about busy. He thought about the last 5 years of careful, deliberate smallness, of keeping his head down and his work manageable and his emotional perimeter secure. He thought about what it felt like to walk into that conference room and be completely, and without apology, the person he actually was. The elevator reached the ground floor. He walked out into a February morning that had decided to attempt something like warmth, the sun at an angle that suggested spring was theoretically possible, the air still cold, but less mean about it than it had been all week. He got in his truck. He sat for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called his sister Linda. She answered on the third ring with the particular alertness of someone who had been following the news and was glad to hear his voice. "I saw the post," she said immediately. "Daniel." "I know," he said. "I know. Those buildings, those families." Her voice had the compressed quality of someone who had been sitting with strong feeling and hadn't had an outlet for it yet. "If you hadn't been there that night." "I was there," he said. "That's what matters." "It matters that you were the one who was there," she said firmly. "Don't minimize it. Emma told me what you said to her in the truck, the math thing. Daniel, you have to hear yourself sometimes." He leaned back in the seat. "I signed the contracts," he said. Silence for a beat. Then quietly, "The consulting job." "Yes." Another silence. "Sarah would," Linda started. "I know," he said. "I know she would. She would be—" Linda's voice broke slightly. She composed it. "She used to tell me that the thing about you was that you never did anything halfway. She said that was the most attractive and most terrifying thing about you." He looked out the windshield. "I tried," he said, "for 5 years, to do it halfway." "I know you did," Linda said, "and you did it for the right reasons. But Daniel, she also used to say that Emma was going to need to see all of you, not just the careful parts." How was quiet. "Emma told me she was proud of you this morning," he said. A pause. Then Linda, in a different voice, a softer one, the one she reserved for moments that had too much weight for regular tone. "She's 8 years old, and she's proud of you for going back, not for leaving it." A beat. "That tells you something." "It tells me a lot," he said. "Good." She steadied her voice back to her normal register. "Now, are you eating?" He almost laughed. "Emma made me waffles," he said. "Emma's 8. She supervised," he said. "I made them. She supervised the syrup situation." Linda made a sound that was half exasperation and half deep affection. "Come for dinner Sunday," she said. "Bring Emma. I'll make something real." "Okay," he said. "And Daniel." She paused. "I'm proud of you too, in case that matters." "It matters," he said. "Thanks, Linda." He hung up. He drove to Rachel's house. Sophia was at the kitchen table when he arrived. Of course she was, because Sophia Reynolds at a kitchen table with a problem in front of her was her natural state as far as he had observed. She had the new laptop open and a legal pad beside it and a coffee that looked like it had been refilled recently, and she was on the phone when he came in, gesturing him toward the coffee maker with the hand that wasn't holding the phone. He poured himself a cup. He sat down across from her. She wrapped up the call in 3 minutes, something about the insurance adjuster and the documentation sequence, and a phrase that she delivered with the precise firmness of someone who had found the exact right way to say a thing and was not going to restate it. That's what the policy covers. I've read it. You've read it. Let's not have a conversation about what it says. She hung up. She looked at him. Insurance adjuster, she said. I gathered. He's very committed to the idea that what happened to my apartment is a gray area, she said. It isn't a gray area. No, he said. It isn't. It's a building whose owner falsified safety records, a fact which is now a matter of public record and criminal charges. She picked up her coffee. I explained this to him. He said he needed to consult with his team. I told him that was fine, but that the timeline for my response was going to move faster than his consultation process. Daniel looked at her. You're going to be a very difficult witness, he said. I'm going to be a very clear witness, she said. There's a difference. She held his gaze. The briefing went well this morning. It went well. Patricia Huang was there. He looked at her. Ellison told you. Ellison and I have been talking regularly since the fire, she said without apology. He keeps me informed. I share what I find. It's a functional arrangement. A pause. Patricia Huang is brilliant. She's been trying to overhaul the pre-inspection database for 2 years, and she keeps getting stopped by budget allocation politics. What she needs is someone with enough credibility in both the fire safety and structural safety worlds to make the technical case in language that budget committees understand. Daniel looked at her. You've been thinking about this, he said. I've been thinking about a lot of things, she said. I had 3 days in a hospital bed. She looked at her laptop. I've been modeling a proposal for a joint fire prevention and structural safety consulting framework. Something that formalizes the gap that Ellison's program is trying to fill, not just in Denver, but as a model that could be adopted statewide. She looked up at him. I need someone to co-author it with me. Someone who can speak to the fire behavior and structural emergency side with the same depth I can speak to the building code and design side. He looked at her for a long moment. You planned this in the hospital, he said. I planned the framework in the hospital, she said. The specific co-author was more recent. She held his gaze. You built something in that briefing room this morning. You explained fire propagation to a room full of fire professionals and a building code official, and they all leaned forward. That's not common. She paused. I want to build something with you. Something that lasts longer than one investigation. He held her gaze. He thought about the proposal in its early form on her laptop screen. He thought about 7 buildings. About 47 properties across 3 states. About the systemic gap that had allowed all of it to exist undetected until one maintenance supervisor smelled something in a hallway on a Tuesday night. He thought about the version of this work that didn't end with a rescue. The version that started before one was needed. Send me what you have, he said. I already did, she said, before you got here. He looked at her. She looked back at him with the expression of someone who has read a structure carefully and found it sound and is prepared to build on it. He picked up his coffee. Rachel came into the kitchen from the hallway, took in the situation at the table with the quick, accurate read of a woman who had grown up with Sophia Reynolds and went to the stove without comment. Lunch in 20 minutes, she said. They worked, side by side at Rachel's kitchen table, with the February afternoon coming in through the window and the smell of whatever Rachel was making filling the house. Sophia explained the framework she'd built, and Daniel read it and asked questions and pushed back on the sections where the fire behavior analysis needed more technical depth. And Sophia took every pushback with the same serious attention she brought to everything, not defensive, not dismissive, but genuinely incorporating. He realized at some point without ceremony that they were building something real. That the proposal on the screen was going to exist in the world and was going to be better for both of them having their hands on it. That this was what it felt like to work with someone at the level they were both capable of. Rachel served lunch at 12:30. Halfway through the meal, Sophia's phone lit up on the table. She looked at it. Something changed in her expression, quick and significant. Webb, she said. She picked up. Yes. A pause. When? Another pause longer. Her jaw tightened. And he's confirming this on record, a beat. Okay. Thank you, Marcus. She hung up. She looked at Daniel. Roy Delaney, she said. The Summit Line principal. The one who turned himself in this morning. He started talking, Daniel said. He started talking, Sophia confirmed. He's giving the DA full cooperation. Names, dates, payment records. She paused. He told the DA that Carl Whitfield approached Summit Line in 2020. Not the other way around. Whitfield identified properties in the Meridian portfolio that needed expensive electrical work and approached Delaney with a proposal. Summit Line would document completion of repairs. They didn't make. Whitfield would ensure the licensing board complaints stayed closed, and Meridian would pay Summit Line a fraction of the actual repair cost while pocketing the rest of what they would have spent. Daniel went very still. Whitfield initiated it, he said. Whitfield built it, Sophia said. Delaney says the scheme started as 2 properties. By the time Whitfield left the licensing board, it had expanded to 9. He kept running it as a consultant. She looked at the phone in her hand. He was skimming money from a safety system and using a regulatory position to protect himself. For 4 years. The room was quiet. Rachel, who had been following this without comment, set her fork down. And the people in those buildings, Rachel said quietly. Were living on top of it, Sophia said. The whole time, without knowing. Daniel thought about Gerald Thorne. About 3 years of copies kept in a folder waiting for someone to open a door. He thought about what it meant that the door had finally opened. Not because a regulator did their job. Not because the system caught it. Because one man kept his records. Because one fire happened to be noticed by a building maintenance supervisor who had spent 7 years learning exactly what he was smelling when he smelled it. Because some things didn't go away. Whitfield is going to prison, Sophia said. It wasn't a question. Whitfield is going to prison, Daniel said. She nodded. She picked up her fork. She ate. That was the thing about her, he thought. She received terrible information. She processed it completely, and she continued eating lunch. Not because it didn't matter. Because it mattered enough to stay functional for. 2 weeks later, the Denver Post ran a follow-up piece. Webb had expanded the investigation to include all 47 Meridian properties. Of those, 19 had documentation irregularities significant enough to warrant inspection. Of those, 11 had active safety concerns. The city had issued remediation orders and was pursuing criminal and civil liability simultaneously. Gerald Thorne gave an interview. He was a quiet man, 63 years old, 26 years in city inspection work, who said with the plain directness of someone who had waited a long time to say it. I knew what I saw in 2021. I filed the complaint because that's what you do when you see something wrong. When it got closed, I kept the copies because I don't know why exactly. I think I just believed that the truth didn't stop being true because nobody was listening yet. Daniel read the interview at his kitchen table at 6 in the morning. He thought about that sentence for a long time. The truth didn't stop being true because nobody was listening yet. He thought about 7 years of training that had stayed with him through 5 years of not using it. He thought about a smell in a hallway on a Tuesday night in February. He printed the interview and put it in the folder where he was keeping the project documentation because some things were worth keeping in physical form. Some things needed to be holdable. 3 weeks after the fire, Daniel was walking the electrical infrastructure of a building on South Broadway, one of the 8 additional properties that Patricia Huang had flagged for inspection using the updated protocol she and Daniel had developed together in 4 meetings over 2 weeks. He was on the 3rd floor reading a thermal imaging panel with a city fire marshal named Okafor, who had the focused, unhurried quality of someone who had been doing this work long enough to trust what the equipment told him. How was focused? In the work completely. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Sophia. He texted back, in an inspection. 2 hours. Her response came back immediately. Not urgent. Call when done. Also, Emma's right about octopus texture change being underappreciated as an engineering concept. I've been thinking about it. He stared at the screen for a moment. Okafor glanced over. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Daniel said. He pocketed his phone. "Third floor east wall. Show me what you're reading on the thermal panel." They went back to work. He called Sophia 2 hours later from the parking lot, sitting in his truck, with the inspection notes on his lap, and the mid-morning sun doing its best with what remained of February. "The South Broadway building is clean," he said when she picked up. "Okafor and I went through every floor. The electrical infrastructure is original, but it's been properly maintained. Actual maintenance. Real records. The kind that match what was done." "That's one for the good column," she said. "There should be more of them," he said. "There will be," she said. "The protocol is working. Patricia is already presenting it to the City Council Building Committee next week. She wants you to speak." "She mentioned that." "Are you going to—" He thought about speaking to a City Council committee. About being in a room and making a case, and being the person who made it with his name attached, and his history visible, and the full context of who he was standing behind the words. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. A pause on the line. Then she said, "I found a space." He looked up from his notes. "For the office," he said. "For the office. Capitol Hill. Third floor, don't say it." He almost said it. "Natural light," she said. "The bones are solid. I already had the electrical inspected." A pause. "I'm going to design it myself, from scratch, which means I'm going to get it right." I thought about a woman who had designed some of the safest buildings in the city, sitting down to design the space where she was going to work. Starting over in the most literal possible sense, and bringing everything she knew to the new beginning. "When do you move in?" he said. 8 weeks, she said, "if the contractor stays on schedule." "And if he doesn't?" "He will," she said. I explained the timeline. He smiled. "Sophia," he said. "Yes." "The proposal," he said. "The joint consulting framework. How are you thinking about the rollout after the council presentation?" "I'm thinking about a pilot in 3 cities," she said. "Denver, Colorado Springs, Aurora, 6 months, documented outcomes, then a state-level presentation." She paused. "It'll take time. Building things always takes time. But the foundation is right. And when the foundation is right, you can build." He looked out the windshield. He thought about foundations. He thought about 5 years of quiet, careful maintenance. About a structure he had built around himself and his daughter that looked from the outside like smallness, and was actually, he understood now, the foundation. The thing that made the rest possible. The steady, unglamorous work of keeping something standing, so that when it was time to build upward, there was something solid to build from. Emma eating waffles at the kitchen table. Linda making dinner on Sundays. Marcus running jobs with the competence and loyalty of someone who had been trusted with real work and risen to it. Gerald Thorne keeping his copies in a folder for 3 years. All of it foundation, all of it load-bearing. He thought about Sarah. I thought about her the way he always did now, not with the sealed, pressurized grief of the years immediately after, but with something that had more air in it. More room for her to be herself inside the memory, not just the absence. She would have done exactly what he did. She had done it. She had walked into a burning building for a neighbor because walking away wasn't something she was built to do. And he had spent 5 years believing that choosing to live meant becoming less than what she had been. He understood now that was wrong. Choosing to live meant bringing everything she was with him, carrying it forward, not as weight, as inheritance. "The city council presentation," he said. "What do you want me to cover?" "The fire behavior side," Sophia said. "What a prevention protocol catches that a response protocol misses. The specific gap between what an inspector trained in building code sees and what someone trained in structural fire behavior sees, and why those 2 things need to be in the same room." She paused. "You can talk about Hargrove Arms, if you're willing." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm willing," he said. "Okay," she said. "We'll build the presentation together. Come by Thursday and we'll start." "Thursday," he said. "And Daniel." She paused, and in the pause he heard the thing she didn't say often, the thing underneath the precision and the directness. The thing that only surfaced in the way she sometimes stopped before the end of a sentence and let the real weight of it arrive. What you did that night, getting me out. You need to know that I don't think about it as something someone did for me. He waited. I think about it as the beginning of something, she said, that we both needed to be in that hallway to start. He looked out the windshield at the February morning. He thought about a door he'd kicked in at 7:20 on a Tuesday night. About a woman on a floor who looked up and said, "You actually came." About a daughter who said, "I don't need you to not be you." About a chief who said, "Welcome back, Carter." About a man named Gerald Thorne, who kept his copies for 3 years because he believed the truth didn't stop being true because nobody was listening yet. He thought about all of it and felt it settle the way good structures settled, not with drama, not with noise, but with the quiet solidity of something that had found its proper load-bearing arrangement at last. Thursday, he said. He hung up. He sat in his truck in the parking lot on South Broadway for one more moment. Then he picked up his inspection notes, started the truck, and drove toward the next building on the list, because the work was the work, and the work was not finished, and he was the man who knew how to do it, and he was not pretending otherwise anymore. Daniel Carter had walked away from one fire. He had walked into another. And this time, he was not walking away.